and welcome to BrightStreamTV. I'm William Everhart, your host, and in this episode we're going to take a look at Adobe InDesign. And this particular episode is going to be a sprint course, so we're going to take you from start to finish on a complete project. The project in this case is going to be this little fellow here. This is going to be, say, a handout for an e-learning course, maybe something that the student can follow along with, and this is simply one chapter in that particular course. So if you want to follow along with me in this project, by all means, you can certainly do that. There is a download button there in the lower right-hand corner of your screen where you can get access to the source files, including the finished file here, and I've actually also included some instructions to help you follow along with. So you can get all that stuff downloaded right now and get ready to get started with this course. So what all are we going to cover in this particular episode? Well, like I said, it's Adobe InDesign, which is a premium page layout tool, and it's one of my favorite tools. For doing this type of work. You can create brochures, magazines, even digital publications. And so we're going to take a very brief look at this very, very powerful tool and get you up to speed on how to use it. Since this is a sprint course, it is intended as a fundamentals type of course, an introductory course, if you will. We're going to take a look at the interface of Adobe InDesign. Then we'll show you how to create a new document. We're definitely going to work a lot with some text. That's the one thing that InDesign does well above most other digital publishing tools, is the fact that it can work with massive amounts of text, and it does it so quickly and so easily. So we're going to spend a lot of time working with text. We're also going to show you how to incorporate images and other graphics into your page layout. We're going to show you how to draw some simple shapes. Now, InDesign is not a true drawing application, but it does have some simple shape tools in there. We're going to show you how to incorporate those into your publication. And we're going to show you how to basically update and maintain your InDesign documents with a little bit of content editing. Of course, we're going to circle back around to the text because this is what InDesign does so well. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about how to set up text styles. And then finally, we're going to show you how to publish your finished piece for however it is you intend to use it. So there you have it. We got a lot of material here to cover in this course, and we're going to take you, like I said, from start to finish on a complete project. So if you're ready, let's dive right in. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the actual interface of InDesign. So we're going to talk about how to navigate that interface and how to navigate your document itself. Now I'm going to jump over to InDesign. When you first launch InDesign, you will be presented with a welcome screen. Now here on this welcome screen, we can see that we have some little features here at the top. So there is a Create tab, a New Features tab, Getting Started, and then of course Tips and Techniques. Now the last three here are great little informational elements. So there's little tutorials in here that you can try out for yourself. But for our purposes here, we want to go back to this Create tab. Here on the Create tab, I can of course create a new document, and there's different types of documents listed here that I can create. I can also open any recent document. And these are the last 10 documents that was open on this particular version of InDesign for this machine. Now here at the bottom of the Open Recent is simply an open command. Using this command, I can open any InDesign document that I have access to. Now I can also use this open command from the File menu. So from the File menu, I can choose to create a new document, or open a document, or open a recent document. So there's a lot of overlap in here, and that makes it really nice for an individual to decide how they like to work with InDesign. It's very, very flexible. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to dismiss this File menu for a moment. I'm going to come back over here to my welcome screen. The welcome screen also has some additional links here at the bottom that just take you to maybe some help documentation and forums and things that are in and around the InDesign tool itself. If you wanted to dismiss this window, you can certainly do that. There is a little close button up here in the upper right-hand corner. It'll dismiss it until the next time you launch InDesign. For now, I'm just going to open an existing document so that we can see the rest of the interface. So here under the Open Recent, I'm going to go to the bottom and I'm going to click on Open. Next, I'm going to navigate to My Files and the InDesign Sprint folder. This is the folder that you can download. You'll have to extract it. It is a compressed file, but if you extract the content in there, you should have several lesson folders. This is lesson 1, but there isn't really a lesson folder for this. There's not really any files to be used for the interface. So I'm going to jump to the end here, to the lesson 8 folder. I'll open this up. Inside of here, there's going to be a lesson 8 start document. I'm going to select this, and in the lower right-hand corner here, I'm going to open this document. Now this is the finished piece. This is what we should be creating as we go along in this course. And the only reason I'm using it here, once again, is just to fully explore the Adobe interface. So let's just start in the top left corner. Right up here. Now I am using a Windows-based machine, so it's going to be a little bit different if you're using a Mac, but the tool functions exactly the same. There's just some minor differences here, and this is where one of those differences comes in. In the Mac interface, the very top row here, you're going to have an actual extra menu item here just before the file menu. You're going to have an InDesign menu. This menu works just pretty much like any other application. Once again, it doesn't matter, Mac or PC. You click on a menu item, the menu is revealed. One of the nice things about the Adobe products is that they give you the shortcuts of these menu items listed to the right of them. Some of the menus actually have submenus. Like if I go here to the Edit menu and I come down to End Copy, you can see that another menu pops open to the side. To dismiss a menu, I simply click outside of the menu window and it disappears. So that's the menu bar. Now for my Windows users, this menu bar continues on and there's some additional icons. Now these are menus as well, but they, instead of using a word, they're actually using little icons. So I have a View Options menu. Looks like an icon though, but it still functions the same. It's a menu. And this one is a little more abbreviated. You just turn these elements on and off. Other menus in here, you can select different options here, and basically you're just toggling these elements on or off. For my Mac users, this bar here, this secondary bar, is actually probably going to be just below your primary menu bar. Now I'm going to follow this on out. To the right here, we have a couple more options. There's one here that I have that's unique to this latest version of InDesign. This is called a technology preview, and it's called Publish Online. You can see they've even highlighted it in this InDesign magenta color here. So it's just a tech preview, not something we're going to explore in this particular course. To the right of that, I have another menu here. Mine's called Essentials. We're going to come back to that in a moment. And then finally, we have a little search field here. Now this search field, entering a value here and pressing the return or enter key would actually open up the Adobe Online Help system. Just below this menu bar, I have what is known as the control panel. Now this is going to be your best friend when it comes to working in InDesign. This panel has a plethora of icons in it, and don't let it overtake you too much. Don't let it just throw you off course here. All of these icons are hoverable. If you hover over them, a small tooltip will pop up and show you or tell you what that particular icon does. Some of the fields here that you have, like the X, the Y, the W and the H, those are pretty self-explanatory. X and Y axis, where am I positioned on the screen? The width and the height, the actual size of an element. But some of the other words may not make so much sense, so they've given you these little icons beside them. Just to the left, if you hover over the icon, it'll tell you what that field represents. So this particular panel, we're going to work a lot in this one, and we're going to return to it quite a bit. And so you're going to get very, very familiar with it. Now, one of the things that kind of throws people about the control panel is that it's contextual, meaning it changes. Let me show you what I mean. If I come over here to the far left-hand side of my screen, I have a series of icons. Now, this is the toolbar. And so I'm going to select this large capital T here. This is my type tool. The moment I do that, look back up here at the control panel. All the icons have changed. Yes. So it is contextual. It depends on what you have selected. What tool are you working with? This particular panel is going to change to give you relevant information about the tool that you're working with or the object that you have selected. Now let's return to that tool panel for just a moment. The tool panel is by default in a single column mode. There's one tool atop the other, and you get a nice little stack here. At the very top of that tool panel is a little dark square up here, and inside of that there is two little icons here, two little arrows. If I click on those arrows, they're actually going to expand this toolbar just a bit, and now I have a two-column layout. Here towards the bottom of that tool panel, it also changes the layout of these icons here. It gives them in a column mode. This one is in a three-column mode here, and it also takes this little color swatch here and makes it a little larger. I really like this particular method, so I tend to use this two-column mode for my toolbar. Now, one last note about the toolbar, and that's the tools themselves. We can see quite a few tools in here, and we're going to go through a lot of these tools, not all of them. But to select a tool, you simply click on it, and then you're using that tool. Now, some of the tools, like the one that I have selected here, it is a rectangle tool. You'll note that it has a small white triangle in the lower right-hand corner just below that icon. Anytime you see that in an Adobe application, it indicates that there are additional tools underneath that one. To access those tools, you simply click and hold on the tool icon there in the panel. This will reveal a flyout menu, and then you can select one of the other tools. You'll also note that as I have this menu open, there are some keyboard shortcuts for the tools. Now, not all of them. The polygon tool doesn't have a keyboard shortcut assigned to it, but most of these tools do have simple single key hotkeys or keyboard shortcuts. Now, I'm going to dismiss this. I'm just going to select the rectangle tool and leave it at that. Now, one other note that I should make about the Adobe Toolbox, and this is kind of unique to Adobe, but it does work across all of the Adobe applications, is that when you select a tool in that toolbox, you will continue to work with that tool until you select another one. So a lot of tools that we work with, you may select a tool to draw an object, and then the tool defaults back to, say, a selection tool or some other type of default tool. Well, Adobe products don't do that. They figure if you selected that tool, you had a reason for it, and so you're going to continue to use that tool. Until you select another. All right, well, let's dive back into that interface and take a look at some of the panels. So of course, here in the center of my screen, this is my document window. I'm going to go all the way over to the right, and there are some icons over here: pages, layers, links, and so forth. Now, these are panels as well, and these have been grouped together into this column over here that we call a doc. And so what I do here is, if I want to take a look at, let's say, my pages panel, I simply click on the icon, and the panel flies out to the left. Now I can adjust the size of the panel. There is a small area here at the bottom, a little textured area to let me expand the panel. If I mouse over the left edge of that panel, I can expand it horizontally as well. The Pages panel happens to be grouped with two other panels, Layers and Links. And if I look at them here in the dock, you can actually see there's little separator bars between certain groups of these panels. So what this indicates is that if I open something like the Pages panel, the Layers and the Links panel will also be accessible. And we can see them here at the top of the Open panel. So there's my Pages, and here's Layers, and then Links. Clicking on these tabs will reveal those panels. Now you can see that once I open a panel, it's partially covering my document here. So what happens when I want to get rid of that? How do I hide this panel? Well, it's quite simple. Come over here to the dock. The panel that is currently open will be highlighted. Simply click the icon. The panel will collapse closed. Now, like the Tool panel, the little panel group here on the right, this dock, if you will, it has a series of little icons here at the top, this little Expand Panels icon. If I click on that, well, it goes ahead and expands all of those panels. Now, they remain grouped together, so there's my Pages, Layers, Links. They're all taking up the same space. They're grouped together. So this is another way that you could work with Adobe InDesign. Remember the menu I mentioned up here at the very top? It's kind of in the top right corner of your screen, over there next to the search field. Mine says Essentials. Well, this is what is known as a workspace. And this particular menu is called the Workspace Manager or Workspace Switcher, depending on who you talk to. What this allows me to do is actually switch up the panels that are available to me very quickly. Now, it's based on different workflows that are used, commonly used, I should say, within InDesign. So I have one here for interactive for PDF. If I choose that one, you see I get a different set of icons over here. Let me go up to the top again. Let me switch that. How about I look for something with, let's say typography. You see it switches up the icons again. Now I'm going to switch mine back to the Essentials. So this is how we left Essentials. I made some changes here. I expanded these panels. I expanded my Tool panel. And so InDesign remembers those changes. Really, really awesome. I'm going to go back over here to the right to my panel dock, and I'm going to collapse that panel again. So in the upper right-hand corner of that panel dock, the two little arrow icons there, I'm going to click on that, and it's just going to make them icons again. Now we also have here in the document area, the document window, we have a few things that are worthy of note. First, in the upper left-hand corner is a little tab for your document. It'll give you your document name and your current zoom percentage. It is possible to have multiple documents open. And if you do, those will also be listed here as little tabs, and you can navigate between them just like you do the panels. At the top and left-hand side of my document window, I have my rulers showing. At the very bottom of the document window, I have a status bar. Some really interesting things going on down here. The one I'm most interested in right now is the Page Navigator. If I click on this particular menu here, I can navigate to all the various pages in my document, including this thing called Master Pages. I'm just going to jump back to my document here. Also down here in the status bar to the right-hand side is a small scroll bar. So it'll scroll horizontally on the right side of the document window is a vertical scroll bar. Now this vertical scroll bar is a very quick way to navigate through the various pages of your document. You can just scroll down this list very quickly. If your mouse is so equipped, you can use the scroll wheel on the mouse to scroll up and down through the pages of your document. But there are other ways to navigate your document. Now, I personally like the little menu here in the status bar because it allows me to jump very quickly to a particular page number. Really like that feature. But there's a Pages panel over here to the far right, and if I open that, I can double-click on a page thumbnail here and be taken to that particular page. Pretty awesome. But now notice this. My pages are kind of, well, off the screen there a little bit. I'm kind of in between pages there. So this is where your zooming comes in. Now, I want to take a look first at the View menu. So let's go up here to the View menu. Now here I have various controls for zooming in and zooming out of my pages. So there's a standard zoom in and zoom out, and they do exactly what you would think. They would get a closer view of your document or zoom out of your document one preset level each time you choose them. There's also this option, Fit Page in Window, and I'm going to choose that, and it will fit the active page, in my case that's page 8, in the window. But notice that to the right of page 8, there's another page, and it's only partially being viewed. In a scenario like this, in a digital publishing tool or a page layout tool such as InDesign, you have this concept of spreads, and it's a left-hand and right-hand page. So let's go back up to the View menu, and there's an option here that says Fit Spread in Window. Now it centers both pages on the screen. So that's pretty much it as far as the interface of Adobe InDesign. Now the really cool thing about this interface is that it is not unique to InDesign. All of the Adobe products have the same interface. Now there are a couple of exceptions. Some of the video editing tools, the Premiere, After Effects, and Audition, they have a slightly different interface. Very, very similar, but when we start moving panels around, it's a little bit different. And then, of course, there is Adobe Acrobat, which always has to be the different child there. It is completely different. So explore the interface here in InDesign. If you get familiar with it and then you use another tool like Adobe Photoshop or Dreamweaver or perhaps even Adobe Illustrator, the look and the feel should be very comfortable to you. All right, let's dive back in and let's take a look at how we zoom in and zoom out on the document pages. So here I have a couple of pages here, and let's say I just want to get a closer look so that I can read what is actually on the screen here. Well, over here in my toolbox, down towards the bottom, there is the zoom tool. It looks like a little magnifying glass. So I'm going to click on that. And when I mouse out over my document, you see the little magnifying glass has a plus sign in it. It means it's going to zoom in. So if I click somewhere on my page, it's going to zoom in on that location one preset amount. If I click again, it zooms in another preset amount. Pretty awesome. But what if I want to get a really, really close look at, let's say, this particular text? Instead of just clicking multiple times, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just to the upper left maybe of where I want to zoom in. I'm going to click and hold and drag. And I'm drawing a little box here with the zoom tool. Now when I release the zoom tool, it's going to zoom in whatever size that box is. Now it does have a limit. It will max out at a certain point, and I want to say it's around 4,000%. So you can see we can get really, really close in here on our text or our imagery. Now once we zoom in so close, how do we move things around? Well, the scroll bar will work, but at this point that scroll bar gets really, really fidgety So just barely moving it is jumping like several lines. So be extremely careful with that. Perhaps a better way to scroll around your window when you're zoomed in so close is to use another tool. Let's go back over to the Toolbox for a moment. Just next door to the zoom tool itself, the little magnifying glass, is a little hand. And if I click on that tool, this is an interactive panning tool. They call it the hand tool, but what it does is it allows me to click and drag on my screen and very carefully manipulate my screen. Now, it's not moving the objects, it's simply scrolling for me, but it's very, very finite. Love that tool. Well, that's how we zoom in. How do we zoom out? Well, you could use the zoom tool. If I select the zoom tool again, you can see now that I'm zoomed in at the maximum 4,000%, the little plus sign has disappeared from my little icon there. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key in my case. If you're on a Mac, that would be the Option key. Now there's a minus sign in there, and every time I click, it will zoom out a preset amount. Well, that can take a little time as well. You know, you want to get zoomed out so you can see the whole page. Instead of using this Alt key or Option key and click, how about we go up to the View menu? From the View menu, I'll choose Fit Spread in Window. You might want to commit this shortcut to memory. Control-Alt-0, Command-Option-0 on a Mac. That will allow you to very quickly zoom out. Okay, so that's how you navigate your document, how you zoom in and zoom out. And we'll probably do a little bit of that during this course. So that's one of those key features that you really want to know how to do. Use the View menu if you can't remember the keyboard shortcuts, but eventually you will commit those to memory. If you use it enough, it just becomes second nature. All right, well, that does it for our first lesson, the interface itself. And hopefully that gets you a little more comfortable with the Adobe interface. Next, we want to see how we can create a new document. So let's dive back in and let's create a new document. So creating a new document. Well, we've already talked about this first bullet point, the welcome screen. We may go back over that and show you how it works when it comes to create a new document. We're going to show you how to create or select a document preset. We'll show you how to add and delete document pages and how to create and apply master pages. And then finally, I want to show you how to adjust a page layout. Maybe you want a slightly different page than the rest of the document. I want to show you how to modify a single page or maybe just a range of pages to suit a different need. Let's jump back over to InDesign. Now here in InDesign, I still have this open document and I want to dismiss that. So to close a document, I'm simply going to go up here to the top of the document window and I'm going to look for that little document tab there, lesson8_start.indd. There is a little X there. I'm going to click on it and that's going to close this document. Now the default nature of InDesign is that it should bring back the welcome screen. Okay? Now if it does not, I'm just going to close mine for a moment. Let's say you have this, you just have a blank screen. Oh my goodness, now what do I do? Well, if you go to the Help menu, you'll find Welcome. And that'll bring back the welcome screen. Now I really like the welcome screen. I'm glad they have made this a part of the InDesign interface. It kind of went back and forth there a little bit. In some editions you had it, some editions you didn't. They kind of dismissed it, but I really like it myself. Right here under the New command, under the Create and New, I can choose some document presets. So I have some basic document types here. I have a print document, a web document, and a digital publishing document. Now the other items here are not necessarily documents. The book, the library, and the CC library, that's a little more than what we can cover in this course. So we want to focus just on these three here. Now I'm going to select a print document. So I'm going to click on this little hyperlink here. And what's going to happen is I'm going to get a new document dialog. At the bottom left of this dialog window, I'm going to turn on this preview option. Now, if you don't happen to have the preview option, that just means you're using an earlier version of InDesign than what I'm using, and that's okay. But these latest editions give you this preview option. I really like it because I can slide this little new document dialog box over here to the right and actually see the document that I'm creating. So here at the top of this window, the document preset, it's set to default right now. You can create your own custom presets. So if you know you're constantly creating a particular size document with a particular number of pages and columns and basically all of the information that we can put in this window, you can capture that as a preset. That way you don't have to go through this process each and every time you create a new document. It's great. Now the next window there is the intent. Now this was the preset that we had selected from the welcome screen. This is a print document. So this is how we intend to publish this document. All this is doing is setting up some of the preset options here. It's turning on facing pages for me. The page sizes, if I click on this, it's going to display standard paper sizes here. I have both US standards and European standards. Now, if you don't want a standard page, there is a width and height field and you can enter your own value. Now, if you look at my screen very carefully here on the width and height, you'll notice that mine is using inches as its unit of measure. The default for InDesign is not inches. It's points and picas. So you may see a number like 56p something. Okay? Never worry about that. The really cool thing about Adobe is that it is so flexible. All of their products are just so flexible. They've been around for long enough to know that different people use their products in different ways, and they try to make it as friendly as possible. So if yours is showing up as points and picas and you wanted to create a custom size, I mean, you can always choose one of these presets here and it would give you the appropriate measurement there in the points and picas. But what if I wanted a custom size? How would I enter that value? Well, you simply type in the value that you want. Let's say that the width for this I want is 10 inches. So I type in 10, the letter I, the letter N. And when I hit the Tab key, so on my keyboard I'm just going to tap the Tab key, it's going to jump to the next available field. In your case, if it is still using points and picas, it will simply translate that measurement to points and picas. Let's take in this point, let's say that for the height field, I wanted to use, let's say 100 centimeters for the height. That's pretty big, but let's say we want to do that. If I type in 100 centimeters, cm, and then I hit the Tab key, you'll see that it makes this document 39.3701 inches. So it's translating it for me. Really, really awesome. Now I'm going to go back to my page size here, and I'm just going to choose a standard letter size page. How many pages do I want in my document? Well, that's really up to you, and you don't have to set a fixed number here. Now, in the case of print, we generally do. We usually have a certain number of spreads. We usually have in sets of 4 or 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a number of pages here at 8. Now my start page, well, it's going to start on page 1. I do have the facing pages checked. I'm using a letter size page. For the columns here, I could set up a number of columns. I really don't want any additional columns. The 1 will be fine, but you could adjust those here. If I were to tick this up marker here, you can see that out here on my screen in my preview area, it's building those columns for me. Now in my case, I just want 1. My margins. The margins are what we see here, these purple and pink lines. These are the outer edge margins here. And these I want to change up just a little bit. Now the margins are kind of linked together. There's a little chain here that says make all settings the same. I'm going to click on the chain to break it. And for our top margin, I'm going to set that at 1 inch. The bottom margin, I'm going to set at 0.8125, once again, inches. For the inside, we're going to set that at 1 inch. And for the outside, that's going to be 2.3125. Now, those measurements I've given you in the little instruction sheet. So you should have those, and those are in inches. And remember, if your preset here is for points and picas, simply enter the IN or the little quotation marks to represent inches. And InDesign will translate it for you. Now there's a last section here called Bleed and Slug, and if it's not available, you'll see it down here. There's a little triangle, just click on it, it will expose that. This is something unique for print documents. You really won't need this for any other type of document, and we really don't need it here, so I'm going to leave it off in this case. Well, that's it. I'm ready to go ahead and create this document, so I'll go ahead and tell it OK. And now we have our first document. If I come over here to the right and I expose my Pages panel here, you will get a listing of those pages. Now notice that page 1 is by itself, but the rest of these pages are kind of ganged together. These are those spreads. And this causes a lot of confusion for folks. Well, why is page 1 by itself, or why aren't all of them by themselves? Well, page 1 is like the cover of your document. So there you have it, your first document here inside of InDesign. Pretty easy to set up. The controls there, I think, are very explanatory, self-explanatory there, at least once you've gone through it once or twice. It's pretty easy to set those up. And just remember that you can always save document presets. So if you're always creating that custom sized, something a little outside of the box there, not the norm, you can always save that as a preset. And then the next time you need to create that same size document, just choose that as your preset. All right. Well, that's going to do it for the document creation. Let's dive back in, let's save this document, and let's take a look at lesson 3. So here I have my document that we just created, and the only thing I've done is just create it, set it up right now. Let's go ahead and save this document. So I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to choose Save. Now, where do I put it and what do I call it? Well, I'm going to navigate back to the lesson folder here. And I'm going to put this inside of lesson 2. And you can call it whatever you'd like. For me, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to call it lesson 2. But you can see that it's going to save this as an InDesign document, and that's exactly what we want. I'll click Save, and there we have it. Now, for those of you who are following along with the lesson files, I've created this document here based on a set of standards that I wanted to use. If you're trying to follow along and maybe yours didn't turn out exactly the same way, what I've done for you is include starting files for each of the new lessons. So we're about to start lesson 3. If you didn't quite get your document to look just like mine, that's okay. You can close your document and you can open a start file in the lesson 3 folder. And I've done that for each of the lessons after this one. So you can always pick up with the new lesson, and it should be exactly what I'm going to have here on screen. So for the rest of this course, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open those new lesson files each and every time we have a new lesson. Now, of course, you can work with your document that you've created. If you feel confident that your document is exactly the way we had intended it, then by all means, use that document and you can see this thing grow into a fully fleshed out project here at the end. All right, well, let's dive back into lesson 3 and let's see what we have. So I mentioned earlier that InDesign's most powerful feature is its ability to work with type, and that's what we're going to start with. We're going to show you how to create what we call a text frame. You really need to get comfortable with this concept because InDesign is a little bit different when it comes to dealing with text. Well, dealing with anything, quite honestly. Everything has to be in a frame. So we're going to talk about a text frame. We'll put some text in there, And then we'll also show you a very common workflow here, and that's how to import text from Microsoft Word. We'll show you how to flow large amounts of text across your multiple pages in your document. And then we're going to go back in and perform some basic text formatting, getting the fonts and the sizes that we want. And then finally, I'm going to show you how to use a little piece of variable data. We're going to use a page number in this case and let it indicate all of the page numbers on our document. We're going to do it one time, and it's going to set it up for the rest of our document. All right, let's dive back into InDesign. So as I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to keep working with this document that you created, that is fine. However, to keep everybody on the same page here, I am going to actually open a Lesson 3 file. So here in the Lesson 3 folder, I have the Start document. Lesson 3 Start, I'm going to open that. Now this also lets me point out a couple other things here. So one of those is the fact that I have two documents open. Check this out. If I click on these different tabs, it'll show me the different documents. Okay. So I'm just navigating through the Lesson 3 file here. Very, very cool. And just like everything that does happen, can happen on live TV, I'm noticing that this particular document is a little further along than what I wanted us to be. So actually, I think I'm going to jump back to Lesson 2 there for a moment. Sorry about that. You actually get a little cheat there, a little jump ahead there. We've got some guides in here, and it's like, well, where did these come from? So let's go and explore that. I'm going to close this, come back to my brand new document here, the Lesson 2 document. Okay, now in here, what I want to do is take a look at these pages. So we've created this document. We've got a set number of pages in here. How do we manipulate these pages? How can we remove pages? How can we add pages? Okay. So over here on the right in my Pages panel, we can see there's the 1 through 8 pages, and maybe I want to remove a page. Maybe let's say that page 8, I don't need it. Well, I'll select it here in the Pages panel. Now there's something you should be aware of. In that Pages panel, there is the ability to view one page in the document window, but target or select another page or pages in the Page panel. So currently I'm viewing page 1, okay? But I have targeted page 8 for deletion. The only difference here is the page I'm viewing, the page number is highlighted. The page I'm targeting, well, the page thumbnail is highlighted. Yeah, a little odd, but pretty easy to get to know once you understand it. So I'm going to target page 8. Just click it once. Now if I double click page 8, I'm actually going to view page 8. So not only am I viewing it, but it's targeted or selected here in the Pages panel. If I click on the little trash can icon here at the bottom of the Pages panel, well, it's going to delete that page. And now we can see that I'm looking at pages 6 and 7. I know that because here in the Pages panel, it's highlighted the page numbers, 6 and 7. So what if I needed to maybe delete multiple pages? Well, let's say I want to delete page 5 through page 7. I'm going to click once on page 5, hold the Shift key, and I'm going to click once on page 7. So it will grab all the pages in between. And I hit the trash can. They're gone. Well, that's great for removing pages, but how do we add pages? Well, that's just as simple. Depending on what page you have targeted up here in your Pages panel, it will add pages immediately after that. So if I target page 4 and I click on the Create New Page icon at the bottom of the Pages panel, it creates page 5. Now what if I need to create a bunch of pages? I don't want to have to sit here and click the New Page icon for 15 more pages. No way. Well, InDesign gives you an option for that. At the top right corner of each and every panel, there's a small icon. I've got my cursor on mine now. It is a small downward facing arrow and 4 horizontal lines. As I said, it's in the top of every panel, top right corner, and this is called a panel menu. And in this case, I have the Pages panel. So when I click on this Page Panel menu, it's going to give me commands for working with pages. And right here at the very top command, Insert Pages. This brings up a dialog box where I can choose to insert a number of pages. Well, I'm going to get back to the 8-page layout that I had before. So I already have 5 pages here. That means I need 3 more. I can also choose where to insert those pages. I can choose to put them in a specific location based on pages here in my document. I can also choose just to put them at the very start of the document or the very end. Click OK, and now I'm back to my 8 pages. Pretty awesome. You can also move pages around. If you have content on those pages, that content will move as well. Just simply dragging and dropping the thumbnails will do that for you. Well, now that we have our pages added and we've deleted some pages and we know how to do that sort of thing, let's talk about master pages for a moment. Now, master pages are like page templates. If you've ever worked with a product like, well, Microsoft PowerPoint, it's slide-based, which is almost like pages. And in PowerPoint, we have the concept of the master slide. In addition, you have the concept of slide layouts, and those layouts are based on a particular master. Now, just like in PowerPoint, you can have multiple master pages inside of InDesign. But what are they good for? Well, anything that you want to appear on your document pages and you want consistency across those pages, insert it on a master page. Something like, well, how about a page number or the title of the book? A lot of times when you see a publication, in the upper left-hand corner of the page will be, say, a title or a section marker, and on the opposing page would be the opposite, either the title of the book or a section marker. And it could be any number of things. There could be web addresses, any type of information. The main thing here is that that information will be transcoded onto every one of the pages in your document that uses that master page. So in our case, we're going to create 2 master pages. Now, Adobe InDesign does not build these for you. So when we create a new document, Adobe InDesign gives us a single master page called the A master page. There's also a blank master called None, and that's exactly what it does. It basically wipes everything out on the page. There's nothing there. So we're going to use the A master and apply some guides to it, and then we're going to build another master page from scratch and base it on the A master. Kind of like the layouts in PowerPoint. You have layouts based on a master page. So let's dive into the creation of master pages. So I'm just going to pick up in the same document I was working on here, and I want to edit my master page. Now I can go to the Pages panel, and at the top section, about the top third or fourth of the Pages panel, is a small section there, and you'll see None and A-master. This area just holds all of your master pages. And as the page numbers in there grow, a little scroll bar here to the right will activate and let you scroll through those. There's also a little dividing line here. There's a little bar here, and if you mouse over it, you can drag that down and give yourself a little more room up here for your masters. Now I want to view that A-master. What I'll do is I'll just double click the name of that. And now we can see the name is highlighted as well as the 2 thumbnails there to the right. So that means I should be viewing my master page here in my document window. Now I'm going to collapse my Pages panel here for a moment. Come over here to the right. I click on the Pages icon to get it out of the way. Now how do I know for sure that this is my master page? Well, one other place that you can check other than the Pages panel is down here in your status bar. In the lower left-hand corner here, the page navigation here. You see it's telling me I'm on a-master. Awesome. Well, how do we want to handle this? Well, I want to put some guides on here. Now we have some basic layout guides here already, some column guides, if you will. And in this case, we have a single column, so the column guides are actually our margins. Okay? And you'll note that this looks a little odd. I have a really wide outside margin and a little bit narrower inside margin. I did that on purpose. We want a little area out here so that we could insert what we call margin notes. Little captions and little things that we might want to insert into our document that is relative to the content here in the margin area. So what I want to do is now subdivide this area up a little bit more. I want to put some guides in here that'll help me indicate a location for, well, those margin notes and then maybe a header and or footer. So this concept is the concept of a guide, okay? You can add guides anywhere you want on your page. You can add as many as you want. And because we're going to add these to our master page, these same guides are going to appear in our document anywhere this master page is used. So let's have a look. Now I want to insert a guide. I want a horizontal line up here that will indicate where the header is going to be. Now to insert this guide, I'm going to go up here to the top and I'm going to look for the ruler here, just above my document window. If for some reason you do not have this ruler, well, then go right up here to the very top menu bar. Look for this small icon. It actually looks like a pair of rulers in the upper left-hand corner of the icon. If you click on that, this is called your view options. You want to make sure rulers is checked. Okay, now that we have our rulers in place, let's go ahead and insert some guides. To create a guide, it's really quite simple. We're going to use the rulers. I'm going to mouse over the ruler. Notice that I'm using the zoom tool here, but it doesn't matter what tool I have selected. The moment I mouse over that ruler, well, the tool changes. I'm going to click and hold the mouse button down, and I'm going to drag it down. As I do this, I get a blue line. And beside my cursor, I get a field that's telling me the position of this guide. It's the vertical position relative to the top of the page. Notice that the guide is only on this left-hand page. But what if I move my cursor over to the right-hand page? You see it jumps over to that side as well. Okay, that's kind of cool. But I really would like this to go across both pages because the header I put on the left, I want it in the same position on the right. So there's a nice little trick for this. If I am dragging a guide down on a single page and I hold down the Control key on a PC, the Command key on a Mac, it will force that guide across both pages and out into infinity here. So what I want to do is I'm just going to drag this down. I'm going to just drop it somewhere. I'm going to release the mouse button first, then the Control key. Because I had nothing else selected, no other objects on these master pages, this guide remains selected. And so if I look at the Control panel, remember this little panel up here at the top below the menu? Notice it's not so confusing anymore. It's been simplified because there's only a couple of things that we can do with guides, and that is the position here. So the Y readout here, the Y position, is telling me where this guide is currently positioned. Okay? So we can insert a value for that. So you don't have to be precise when you're placing these guides. You can actually just drop them somewhere on the page and then come back and edit either the Y or the X field to accurately position the guide. In this case, I want this guide at 0.6875. And that's going to be inches. So I'm going to go ahead and type in that value IN. I'm going to hit the Enter key, and that guide is going to jump to that position. Now, let's put a guide down at the bottom for the footer. So once again, I'm going to come over the ruler here at the top of my screen, click, hold, and drag, Once I begin dragging into my document, I'm going to hold down the Control or the Command key if you're on a Mac, and just drag it down here anywhere on the page. I'm going to release the mouse to drop that guide and release the Control key. I come up here to the top into the Control panel. I highlight that Y value, and the value that I want is 10.3215. 10.3215. I'll hit the Enter key, and that guide will jump just below my margin area. Now, I've been using the unit of measure of inches here, and this is probably as good a time as any to show you how to change that, because it can be a little frustrating if the document is always showing you measurements in a unit of measure you're not comfortable with. So how do we change that? On any open document, you want to make sure that your rulers are visible. And in the upper left-hand corner of your document window, where the two rulers meet, there is a small square. If you right mouse click in that square, you can change your unit of measure. So I'll choose inches here. Mine's already set to inches, and there you have it. Now, every unit of measure that you use from here on out on this document will be in inches. Pretty cool. Well, let's keep on with this. Let's go ahead and add some vertical guides. Okay? So to add a vertical guide, you're going to use the vertical ruler. Mouse over the ruler, click, hold, and drag out onto the screen. If you'd like, you can hold down that Control key or the Command key and just drop it somewhere here on the left edge. Doesn't matter where, just drop it there. At the top in the Control panel, now you're going to use the X field. This is its horizontal position. We're going to set that at 0.25 inches. That's 1/4 of an inch. Press the Enter key or the Return key, and it will jump to that position. We want 3 more vertical guides. So let's drag those out here really quickly. I'm going to drag out my first one. I'm going to drop it at 2 inches. The next one is going to go all the way over here on the right-hand-most page. But notice how the measurement doesn't restart on this page. So the measurement is based on the spread. It's taking into account both pages together. So the rightmost guide here is going to be at 15 inches. And then finally, we're going to have one more vertical guide all the way out here on the end, and this is going to be at 16 3/4 of an inch. So that's 16.75. Once again, I've given you all these measurements in the little instruction sheet, so it'll be very easy for you to duplicate this later on. All right, well that lays out our guides. And I think that's all I want to do for this particular master page. So let's save our document. I'll just go to the File menu, choose Save, and now our document, at least the master page for our document, is using these guides. Let's have a look at our document pages. So down here in the lower left-hand corner of the status bar, down here at the bottom of my document window, my little status bar there, I'm going to click the A Master pop-up here, and that's going to give me all of my pages, and I'm just going to jump to, say, page 2. And sure enough, the guides are on page 2, and if I scroll through my document, you can see they are consistent across all of the pages here. Pretty awesome. Let's take a look at creating a new master page. Let's go over to the Pages panel. I'll open my Pages panel. And maybe I want to rename the A Master, because A-Master really doesn't tell me a whole lot. I'm going to double-click the name here, and that'll take me back to viewing that document, and it also targets it. In the upper right-hand corner of the Pages panel, I'm going to click the drop-down, and I'm going to choose Master Options for A Master. Here I can give it a name. Now you can also change the prefix, but I don't recommend it. I would leave that as a capital letter. Just leave that alone. It's going to auto increment that for you. But the name, I'm just going to call this Basic Guides. Okay? Just something simple, something that lets me know what's happening with this particular master page. I'll click OK, and there we have it. Now, what about a new master page? How do we create a new, just maybe a blank master page or base one off of this one? Well, in the upper right-hand corner of that Pages panel, click the drop-down menu, and in there you will find New Master. You'll select this option, and you can see the prefix has been auto-incremented to B. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to call this one Headers, Footers. And notice that I have some extra options here. One, I have a based on master. Currently it's set to none. Well, I want to base this on the basic guides. And what this will do is it will incorporate that master page into this one. So all of the guides we've just created, they're going to be duplicated onto this B Headers Footers master page. You can also change the page size, although I don't recommend it, especially if you're basing it on another master. You want to keep those the same page size. So we're just going to click OK, and there we have it. So now I'm working on the Headers Footers master page. Once again, if you look in the status bar, lower left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the B master page that you're working on. Let's save this document. And now let's talk about creating text. Okay? So that's really where we wanted to be. I kind of got ahead of myself there earlier. But now we want to revisit this text thing here. We want to create some text on this master page. And recall that anything I create on the master page, well, it's going to show up on my document pages. So there's this concept of the frame that I mentioned earlier. Everything inside of InDesign has to have a container called a frame. There are text frames, there are graphic frames, there's all types of frames here, but basically everything inside of InDesign has to have a frame. In our case, we're going to create a text frame, and we're going to use the Type tool to create that. You could also use one of the frame tools. There are just generic frame tools that will allow you to create these containers throughout your document. Now, this is really handy if you're the layout artist and you need to just basically get a look and a feel and position and size of the various elements. Maybe you don't have the text, or maybe you don't have the imagery quite yet. You can use these containers to at least give you a visual representation of the positioning, sizing, and spacing of elements on the pages. So, frames. Just keep that in mind. Everything inside of InDesign has a frame. Let's dive back into our document here and let's create a text frame and let's put some text in it. So I want to create a header up here. And we've put the little guides here in place for this. And so now I'm just going to go over to my toolbox. I'm going to grab my Type tool. It's indicated by the big capital T, Type tool. With it, I'm going to start here where the top horizontal guide intersects the outermost vertical guide here on the left-hand page. Where those two intersect, I'm going to click, hold, and drag up and to the right. And I'm creating a frame. I release the mouse, and because I was using the Type tool to create this frame, InDesign goes ahead and starts the little blinking icon there for me. I'm ready to start typing. Okay? So this particular little book that we're creating here, this little handout, the title of it is just Dreamweaver Fundamentals, another Adobe product here. So I'm just going to type in the name Dreamweaver Fundamentals. Okay. Now, if I wanted to change the font or change some property of this text, well, I have to use the Type tool. and I click and drag over the text to highlight it. Works pretty much like any other text editor. You'll notice here at the top of my screen, the control panel is showing my text controls. So I have things like my font and all that sort of stuff up here. Maybe I want to change the font. Well, I'll click this little drop down here and I can choose from any font listed on this particular machine. So I'm going to stick with something pretty simple. I'm going to use a myriad. I'm actually going to type the name MYR, and that's going to start filtering my fonts by name. So here we go. I have maybe a Myriad Pro Bold. Now if you don't happen to have this font loaded, that's okay. Just pick whatever font you want. When I choose that font, my text is updated. Pretty cool. To the right of the font name, the little font drop down, is these two little T's. This is the font size. This too has a little drop down here, and there are some preset sizes, so I might choose something like the 18 points. Looks good. Okay. Now I'm still using the type tool. Remember I said that anytime you're working in InDesign, you select a tool, you will continue working with that tool until you choose another. So let's create another text frame. Let's go to the bottom of the page here. I'm still using the type tool, so I'm going to start there where the horizontal line intersects the leftmost line there. Click, hold, and drag out across the page. Release. This time, instead of actually typing something in here, I want to use what we call variable data. Now, variable data is just that. It is variable. It can change based on a number of scenarios. In this case, it's going to change based on the page that we are located on inside the document. So let's go up to the type menu here. This is a really neat little feature. Towards the bottom of the type menu, you have this option, Insert Special Character, and this will reveal another menu, and you're going to choose Markers, which is going to reveal yet another menu, and in here we're going to choose the very first option, the current page number. What page is this particular text frame currently on? We're going to choose that, and then I'm going to grab my zoom tool. I'm going to click and drag over the bottom left corner of this leftmost page here. InDesign has inserted the letter B. That's because I'm working on the B placeholder, or B master page, sorry. So the B master page is what we're viewing, and that is, well, for all intents and purposes, its page number. Now I want to format this as well, so I'm going to switch back to my type tool. I'm going to highlight that letter B. Go ahead and increase that size. Let's say 18 points, and let's match what we did there at the top. Let's do, say, a Myriad Pro Bold. If you don't have that, just choose whatever font you want, but it instantly updates that particular item. Awesome. Now, I'm going to switch back to the regular selection tool. Remember the frame that I was talking about? Everything inside of InDesign has a frame, a container. And when we switch to a regular or just a default tool, a selection tool, that's the very first tool in your toolbox. It's indicated by a dark gray or black arrow. When we switch back to this particular text frame is selected. We can actually see the container itself, the frame. Now I'm going to zoom out just a touch. I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut of Control- so that we can see the whole frame here. The frame is this little box, and it has these little white squares on it. The white squares are little handles, and we can manipulate those handles, okay? Change the size of the container. I'm going to grab the lower right-hand corner of this container, and I'm just going to drag it back this way a little bit. I don't really need a text container that large, so I'm going to shrink it down just a touch. Okay. That's it. Now we're going to come back to this in a later chapter and talk about editing all of these frames, but I just wanted to show you the concept of that frame. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go up to the View menu. I'm going to go back to Fit, Spread, and Window. This way I can see both the left and right-hand pages. Now this initial tool here, this selection tool, that's exactly what it does. You see, it makes selections. So if I click on the Dreamweaver Fundamentals frame up here, it will select that frame, but it deselects the frame at the bottom. So selecting one item at a time. If I want to select both items, well, I click on the first one to select it. I hold down the Shift key and I click on the other item that I want to select. Now they're both selected. And now we see something else that's kind of unique to the Adobe products. We see this bounding box. You see there's a larger box that's encompassing the two items. Okay. Well, what do we want to do with this? Well, we want to mimic this over on the right-hand page. Now, you could certainly go over on the right-hand page and create two new text frames, but why do that? We can just replicate these. So with these two items selected, go up to your Edit menu and choose Copy. Next, go back to the Edit menu. Now, there is a Paste command, okay? But I'm going to jump over that because there's something a little more accurate here. How about Paste in Place? Well, when you choose that, it looks like, well, nothing happened, William. Well, yes, it did. It put an exact copy of the elements you copied right on top of their parents there. So now what we're going to do is just move these to the right-hand side. Now, where's my Move tool? Or is there a Move tool in InDesign? There isn't. You're going to use the Selection tool to move these objects. Now, they're already selected, so all you have to do is mouse over either one of the objects. I'm going to mouse over my Dreamweaver Fundamentals title here, and I'm simply going to drag it to the right. Now, the frame at the bottom is moving as well. Okay, great. So I'm going to slide this over, and these guides are going to help me keep these elements in alignment. So you can see as I start to move this, they almost act like magnets, those little guides do. But I'm going to move this to the right so that the right edge of my title box here, the Dreamweaver Fundamentals, that little box touches that rightmost guide on the right-hand side of the page. And I'm going to release. Now what about the page number here at the bottom? Okay, well, not a big deal. It didn't move over, it wasn't exactly the same size. So I need to deselect this. I'm going to come out here somewhere on my page and click once. There's nothing here on this page, it's empty. So when I click there, I'm telling InDesign to select nothing. Now I'll go down to the bottom of the page, click on that little page number here, targets the frame, I'm going to click, hold, and drag to the right. Once again, I'm going to use these guides as alignment for the positioning of this object. Okay, starting to look pretty good, starting to come together here. The only problem we have is the positioning of the text. Text in a container, by default, top left corner. And in this case, I want to move that. So once again, I'm going to select both of these text frames. So I have the bottom one selected. I'm going to shift click on the top one here on the right-hand side. Now I want to change the alignment of the text inside those containers. To do that, I need to open up a paragraph panel. Okay? So panels. I've got several panels here on the right, but I don't see anything that indicates paragraphs. Any panel that you're looking for can be found under the Window menu. I go to Window, and I come down to Type and Tables, and I will locate Paragraph. I'll click on that, and a Paragraph panel opens up. At the top of this Paragraph panel are different little icons for alignment. I'm going to choose Align Right, and the text in both of those panels jumps to the right-hand side of their containers. Pretty cool. Now this panel, this paragraph panel, this thing's pretty handy. I might want to use this again, but I don't want to have to go up to the Window menu every time to select it. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this panel and drag it over here to where these other panels are. I'm going to grab it by its name, and I'm going to do this. You can grab it anywhere at the top of the little panel itself, but I'm going to be very particular about this. I'm going to grab it by the G in paragraph. I'm going to click and hold there. I'm going to drag it to the right. Now, The panel touching the other panels over on the right doesn't do anything, but the moment my cursor, which is there at the G in paragraph, the moment it gets close to those panels, well then things start to happen. So I'm going to put my cursor here right below, in my case, the CC Libraries panel. The panel I'm dragging, paragraph, is semi-transparent and there's a little blue line there. That indicates that I'm about to add this to the dock. So I've just added a panel to my interface. Very, very cool. Any panel that you have open, if I go back to the window menu, go back down to Type and Tables, there's another panel there called Character. I'm going to click on that. Once again, it opens here in the center of my screen, but I want to make it part of the interface. I grab the name, Character, drag it over here. This time I'm going to drop it right on top of the Word paragraph, and it's going to group these two together. Isn't that cool? This is so nice that we can customize our interface to suit the way we want to work. All right. Well, that takes care of the master pages. So how do we use these master pages? Now, I indicated earlier that anything we put on the master page, well, that's going to propagate to the document pages that use those masters. But how do we apply those masters to our document pages? We're going to do that next, and then we're going to start flowing some text into this document, and then we'll take a break. So let's dive back in and apply masters to our pages. So once again, I want to navigate to my Pages panel here. I'm going to open up my Pages panel. And we can see here in the little page thumbnails, the ones here at the bottom, these are my document pages. They all have the letter A on them. And this is an indicator that it is using the A master page here. So I want pages, let's say page 2 and 3, to use the B headers and footers. Well, how do I do that? Well, one way is to drag and drop. So if I grab the name of the master that I want to work with, B, headers and footers, I'm going to click and hold on the name, and I'm going to drag it and drop it right onto page 2. Okay? You see page 2 now has a little B on it. And if I double click on page 2, we can actually see that page 2 has a page number and the title. If I do the same for page 3, I'll just drag and drop the B headers and footers onto page 3. Instantly, the title and the page number are inserted. Well, that's awesome, but what if you have, oh, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred pages in a document? Do you want to have to drag and drop every time? No, you don't. Let's go back over to the Pages panel for a moment. In the upper right-hand corner of the Pages panel, we're going to click on the panel menu. About halfway down that list, you will see the command of Apply Master to Pages. I'm going to choose that option, and then I'm allowed to choose which master page I want to work with. I want to work with the B master. And then I can choose a page range. So in here, I've already applied it to pages 2 and 3. I want to apply it to the rest of the pages in my book here. So I'm going to start at page 4 and go through page 8. So I'm going to type 4-8. I'll click OK, and now all of those pages are using that B placeholder or master page as well. And any objects that we put on the master page, well, they're on those pages. The last thing I want to show you is dealing with page number 1. Let's actually navigate to page 1. I'm going to double click on the thumbnail here in the Pages panel. Now page 1 is going to be the cover of my book, or maybe just the intro to a chapter. And I want this page to look a little different than the other pages in my book. So this is a very common practice. We have a slightly different layout. The page size itself is exactly the same, but the layout is a little different. Now in this case, there's really not a need for me to create a master just for this one page. However, if I were going to create multiple pages like this, maybe this document was going to have multiple chapters, it might be worthwhile to create a master page just for those entry-level pages or those introductory pages for the chapter. And you can call it something like chapter intro. Like I said, the flexibility there is limitless. You can do whatever it is you want with this tool. And this is just one of those features. I can build master pages, as many as I want, and specific to unique pages in my document. But there's really not much of a need for that unless you're going to repurpose those pages or have multiple pages like that. If I'm only going to have one page that's different, there's really no need for a master page just to change the layout. So what I want to show you is how to take an individual document page and change the way it looks. Let's dive back into InDesign. So the first thing I want to do on this particular page is basically get rid of all of those guides. Now, if I try to select one of these guides here on page 1, it won't let me do it. I can't grab a hold of it. And that's going to be because those elements are on the master page. Anything that's on the master page is automatically locked out on the document page, so you don't inadvertently delete it or move it. So what I want to do is I want to change this. I want to use a different master page. In fact, I want to use a blank master page. And we have one right here. It's called None. So I'm just simply going to drag the name None right onto page 1. Okay, that gets rid of the guides, but notice the layout of the page is still the same. I have this single column. It's kind of offset to the left-hand side. I want to change that as well. I want this to be a more balanced page. It's a cover page after all. To change this, I'm going to go up to the Layout menu. Here in the Layout menu, I'll choose Margins and Columns. In this case, my margins are reflected, whatever's happening in my document. Okay? So this is how I set my document up, and I want to change this. Okay? It's going to be a very subtle change, but what I want to do is I want to change the inside and outside measurements here. So inside is going to be 0.75, and I'm going to duplicate that on the outside. Got to be sure to get all of that. There we go. And when I click OK, you see now my page is reflected that update. Okay? Now what about the other pages? What if I go to page 2 and page 3? If I navigate to those pages, you see they still have that same narrow margin kind of offset to the interior or the spine of my book. So all we've done is changed page 1. Pretty awesome. Well, let's go ahead and save our document. And let's take a look at some more text frames. Let's go ahead and add a text frame on page 1. Let's add the title of our book. So once again, I am going to use the Type tool for this. And just as a good rule here, I'm going to use the top left margin here. I'm going to click, hold, drag down about halfway down the page and all the way to the right margin and release. Now my cursor is remembering whatever the default font settings were for this particular document. Now I can go ahead and change those now. I know this is going to be different. So up here at the top in my control panel, I'll click the font menu to drop it down, and I'm going to type in that same Myriad Pro. I'll select it from the list. I'm going to use the bold version here. For a size, I think we're going to go with something a little bit larger since this is the title here. I'll go with something a little bit larger. Well, let's start out with something like 30 points. If we want to, we can change it later. But you can see that my little cursor now has changed to reflect that size increment. Okay, let's type in our title, which is going to be Dreamweaver Fundamentals. I'm going to type a return. So I'm just going to press the return key, and this is going to start a new paragraph for me. And this is going to be, let's say, my chapter. So I'm going to actually title this Chapter 1, Interface Basics. Okay, so we're just manually entering text here. Simple enough. Now there's another way to handle this. What if you have someone else writing text for you? what if we have a team of writers maybe a subject matter expert, and they're actually writing the actual text that's going to go in this document. I don't have to key that text in. I can actually import it. And InDesign can actually import or place, as Adobe likes to call it, various text types. The most common would be a Word document or just a raw text file. So let's take a look at the process of placing a text file here inside of our InDesign document. So the first thing I want to do is create a container for it, a frame. Where do I want this text to be placed? Well, I'm going to have a little bit of introductory text, and I want to put it in a small frame here at the bottom of this page. So just kind of down here in this lower half, I'm going to click, hold, and drag with my type tool to create a container. Now this container is going to be a little bit narrower than the margins itself, and then I release. Next, I'm going to go to the File menu because we want to import this text. Now, Adobe refers to this as a place command, not an import command. So a little different, but once you get used to it, it makes sense. We're going to place something from an external document here. We're going to place, and then we're going to navigate to our lessons folder here. Let's locate Lesson 3. In there, I've provided you with an intro text Word document. We're going to select that. And then here at the bottom, there's three options. Now, depending on your interface, these may be listed horizontally or vertically, but basically it says Show Import Options, Replace Selected Item, and Create Static Captions. I want to turn on the option that says Replace Selected Item. Now, what does this mean? Well, what do I have selected? I'm editing this text frame, right? So replacing it is exactly what it's going to do. It's going to insert this text into that box I just created. I'm going to click Open, and there it is. Text inside of a text frame. Pretty cool. Now the formatting and everything else is coming from that Word document. So if there's any formatting applied, that's being replicated right here inside of my InDesign document. But I can highlight this text and I can edit it. It's fully editable. Well, let's take this up another notch. Let's go to page 2 and let's see what happens when we import larger amounts of text. So over here in my Pages panel, I am just going to double click here on page 2. I'm going to dismiss my Pages panel for a moment. And this time, I'm going to place a document without a container. So I'm going to place another Word document. Now this one's going to be a multi-page Word document, but I'm not going to create the container first. I'm not going to create a frame. I'm just going to simply go to the File menu and choose Place. Here we have another Word document called Chapter 1. I'm going to select that and I'm going to turn off the Replace Selected Item. Turn that off. I'm going to click Open. And because I don't have a container selected and because I am not replacing a selected item, Adobe returns with this thing that they call the Place Gun. That's this little cursor that we see here. It's showing me the first couple of lines of the text of this document. Those are the actual text that's in that document. Now here's the really cool thing about it. We set up this document to have a certain set of margins here, okay? And that's what's represented by these purple and pink lines. Now, if I mouse here to this top margin, just right up there, and I'm kind of in the center of the column there, if you will, but I'm right there at that top margin. When I mouse over that and then I click once, InDesign created a container for me that matched my column guides, or in my case, my margin guides. So if I had had a document here with multiple columns, InDesign would have created a single column of text for me. Pretty awesome. Now, if you look in the lower right-hand corner of this text frame, there's a small red box with a red plus sign in it. This indicates that there's more text than can fit in this container. So we need to get hold of the rest of that text. How do we do that? Well, first we need to switch tools. I know this is a little odd because we're working with text, so you'd think we'd want to use the text tool. Not in this case. Instead, we're going to work with the selection tool, the black arrow. I'm going to choose that. I'm going to click once on the little red plus sign, and my black arrow now changes back to that place gun. I'm going to mouse over here to the second page. Now, before we click, I know you're wanting to go ahead and just click and watch InDesign work its magic there. What I want to do is I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key. Okay? So if I'm going to hold down my Alt key, I'm going to come up here to this top margin here, and I'm going to click. Now, what did that do? Well, holding the Alt key while I clicked not only placed this text frame, but it went ahead and loaded up the rest of the text, all of that overset text. So now I'm ready to move on to the next page. Well, how do I get there? I'm going to go over to the Layout menu. From the Layout menu, I'm going to choose this option, Next Spread. It jumps me to pages 4 and 5. Now, I don't know how much more text I have. I know I have several pages, but I'm not exactly sure how many pages. At this point in my design, it really doesn't matter how many pages I have. I'm going to let InDesign figure it out for me. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key. I'm going to mouse over this top margin here on page 4 and click. When I do, InDesign goes ahead and places all of the text. Now check this out. My cursor has changed back to an arrow, okay? And I'm going to go over here to my Pages panel for just a moment, and let's see what's happened. We can actually see text on all of our little pages here. And look at that. How many pages did we set up this document as? We set it up as 8 pages, right? Well, now I have 9 pages because this document actually contained more text than I had room for. So InDesign, well, it just helped me out and added this extra page. So as I said, InDesign is absolutely incredible when it comes to controlling text. And you can see just some of that power right here. Placing text from an external source like this is a very common workflow. And so you want to get familiar with that. Now there's more that we can do with this, including controlling the styling and the formatting that's coming over from our external document. That's a little more than what we can cover here. Suffice to say that it's very easy to place these documents inside your InDesign layout. And if you need more pages, well, InDesign will handle that for you. Pretty awesome. So right now we're going to take our break, and when we come back, we're going to continue to flesh out this document. We want to take a look at some images and some graphics, and also how to create additional content here inside of InDesign. Well, welcome back everyone. My name is William Everhart, and once again we are here right smack in the middle of an InDesign sprint. So in the first half of the course here, we have seen how to navigate the interface, how to create a document, and we started adding some text to that document. So beginning in the second half, we want to take a further look at formatting the text that's in our document, and then we're going to move on to start adding some additional content, some images and some graphics and some other things here. So let's dive right back in where we left off here, and let's get into formatting some text. So we had left off here, we had imported this rather long Word document, and we saw that InDesign automatically added this page number 9 for us. And you'll also note that, see the red text there and some of the spacing and all that sort of stuff. All of that formatting has come over from the Word document. So that is awesome. I don't really have to do anything to it if I don't want to. But there is some text in here that I do want to format, and this is the text that I inserted manually, the text that I typed in here. So let's jump back to page 1 for a moment. Now, once again, I'm going to use my little status bar here in the lower left-hand corner because to me that's one of the fastest ways to jump to a particular page. Here we can see the title of our book here and this little chapter indicator here. Well, I want to edit that text. So I need to use a proper tool for that. I need to use the type tool. I'm going to click on my type tool, and if I mouse over this text, my type tool changes ever so slightly. This is one of the things that you want to be aware of in all of the Adobe applications, is that cursor feedback. Your mouse cursor is constantly giving you feedback in an Adobe app. If my cursor is out here on the edge of my document, you see that I have my type cursor with a box around it. Indicates that I am going to perhaps create a frame for text to sit in. There's no frame here currently, so I would have to create one. However, the moment I mouse over an existing text frame, say this one here with the title, notice that the box disappears. InDesign realizes that there is an active text frame there, and it's going to allow me to edit it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight the phrase Dreamweaver Fundamentals, and I'm going to change the font here just a little bit. I'm going to change the size of it. I want to come up here to the Control Panel. And up here in the Control Panel, on the far left-hand side, there's two little icons here. And I want you to get familiar with these because we're going to start using these here. The first one is a capital A, and that means character formatting. And we've seen this up to this point. It's giving me basic character formatting, the font and the size and some different options here. But the other one here below it is a kind of a backwards P. This is for your paragraph formatting. If you want to get technical about it, it's called a pilcrow is what it's called. But if I click on that, now I'm going to see, well, that looks like paragraph formatting. And that's exactly what it is. So this control panel is essentially replicating the paragraph and character panels that I opened earlier. Those are still available over here on the right. There's my character panel, there's my paragraph panel. So either of these would work. You can either use the panels here on the right or the control panel here at the top. So I like using the control panel. So I'm going to switch back to my character formatting controls. The type that I have highlighted, it's Myriad Pro 30 points. I'm just going to increase that a little bit. Let's go up to say 36 points. Let's make it a little bit larger. Okay. That's okay, but I really want it to stand out a little bit more. Let's go a little higher with it. Well, the next step up is 48. That's okay, but I think I want to go a little bit beefier. So what I can do is, instead of choosing one of these presets, I can actually type in a value. So I'll just highlight that value, and I'm going to type in 54. So 54, in this case, PT. The PT stands for points, and that's a standard unit of measure for text. So 54 PT here, I'm going to hit the Enter or Return key to accept that, and there we have it. Our type has been reformatted to that size. Now the other thing I'm seeing here is that the word fundamentals is breaking. You see, it's putting a hyphen in there. Maybe I don't want that. In fact, I don't particularly care for hyphens myself. So I can handle this in a couple of ways. One, I can control it with the paragraph controls. You can see here that I have the paragraph panel open on the right-hand side of my screen, and there at the bottom there's a hyphenate option. Now this is also available, once again, up here at the top in the control panel. If I click on that little pilcrow symbol to the far left, these are all of my paragraph formatting controls, and about halfway across the screen there, you'll see hyphenate. And if I simply uncheck that, then it will break this as whole words. I'll never get a hyphenated word here. Pretty awesome. Now, once I do that, notice the spacing between the two lines of text. This is referred to as the leading amount. And what I want is to maybe tighten that up a little bit. So this particular feature is a character control. So I'm going to switch back to the capital A here in my control panel. It's going to give me my character controls. I can also do this over here on the right in my character panel. The field that we're looking for is called leading, and you'll find it here in the control panel or there in the character panel. It's represented by two capital A's kind of stacked on top of each other. That's your letting amount. Now, it is set to an auto amount, and in this case, that is 120% of the font size. And that works for most text that you work with. But in something like this, where the text is really getting large and it's becoming a title for a page, we probably want to override that. So what do I want to do here? Well, I can play around with this just a little bit. I have the text size set to 54, and let's say I try maybe a 60 points here. It's a little tighter, but I can adjust this as well. I can put in a custom amount. Instead of actually typing in a custom amount, maybe I don't know exactly what it is. I can use the little up and down arrows to the left of this field to increment it by 1 point at a time. So I'll just dial this back down to, I've got about 55, 54. So I'm pretty much matching my font size there. But it's drawing those two lines of text a little closer together. If you're accustomed to using a tool like Microsoft Word, this would be your line spacing. Okay? All right, pretty awesome. Now, one of the other things that I can do is I can put some extra space between the word fundamentals and Chapter 1 interface basics. Now, these two elements are two different paragraphs. Okay? So Dreamweaver Fundamentals is one paragraph, and then Chapter 1 interface basics is another paragraph. One tool that could help you decipher the different paragraphs and the different elements is what we call hidden objects, or hidden characters in this case. And what I want to do is I want to go up to my menu bar up here. I'm going to go slide over to the right, and I want to look for this little symbol here that says View Options. It's a pair of rulers kind of in the top left corner. We saw this earlier when we were actually toggling our rulers on and off. Well, this little menu has a lot of little handy tools inside of it, and one of those is hidden characters. So I'm going to turn this on. And now you can see that right after the word fundamentals, there is this blue Pilcrow symbol again. That indicates the end of a paragraph. So what does this mean to me? Well, it just gives me options on how I can change or format this text. And there's so much we can do with it, and I don't want to dig into it too deep, at least not for now. But let's just say that I want to put a little extra space in here. One way to do this is to use a paragraph option. Once again, I'm going to return to the control panel. I'm going to go over here to the far left. I'm going to choose the Pilcrow symbol to bring up the paragraph formatting options. And there's a series of fields here. There's several of them. There's 8 of them. And if you mouse over the small icon to the left of those fields, you will find a thing called space before. And if you go out to that last field on the top right there, space after. So this is going to insert additional space after this paragraph. So it's not going to insert any spacing between Dreamweaver and fundamentals. So I'm just going to increase that value. I'm just going to click the up arrow, and I'm just going to do this visually. I think a couple of clicks here seems to look pretty good. Gives me a little extra space. If you want a little more, add a couple more in there. But it's just spacing between the paragraphs. Pretty cool. Okay, how about some more text editing here? Let's go over to our master pages. I'm going to go down here to the very bottom of my status bar. I'm going to click my page navigator here, and I'm going to choose the headers and footers. In here, I have the Dreamweaver Fundamentals title as far as my header. Okay, and that's great, except notice that the text, once again, is at the top left corner of, or the top right corner on the right-hand side of that container. That's the default placement of text at the top left corner. Now, the one on the right, we adjusted the paragraph alignment. But what about that vertical alignment? I really want the bottom of Dreamweaver Fundamentals to sit right here on this line, this guide that I've inserted as a marker here. So how do I get that to happen? Well, of course, I could take my selection tool, I could select that frame and then very carefully move it down. But then I'm kind of playing the guessing game here. So I don't want to do that. Instead, I want the bottom of this frame touching that top guide there. So I'm just going to go to the Edit menu, choose Undo Move Item, and that's going to put it right back where I had it. Now, I want to force this text in this frame, and if I shift-click the frame on the right, I want to force both of those down to the bottom of the containers. To do this, I'm going to go to the Object menu. From the Object menu, about midway down, Text Frame Options. This is one of my favorite features of InDesign. Sometimes it's just the simplest things in life, but this one to me is just so wonderful. I'm going to click on this, and it allows me to control various aspects of the frame itself. In the first tab here, down towards the bottom, it says Vertical Justification. The default is to align the text to the top. I'm just going to set it to the bottom. Because I have my preview option toggled on here, we can actually see it happening in the background. Now, if your preview is not on, just simply turn it on and you'll see that text drop right down there to the bottom of that container. Pretty cool. I'll tell this OK. And there we have it. I've just formatted that text maybe in just a little bit different of a way. I didn't have to highlight the characters in this case. That particular feature was dealing with the frame itself, not necessarily the text or the individual characters or paragraphs inside of it. Pretty cool. All right. Well, what else have we got on tab for you here? I think that's it. We're looking pretty good. We're in pretty good shape here. Let's go back over to our Pages panel, and let's take a look at that introductory page again, page 1. Yeah, this thing is really starting to come together. Now, as I said earlier, the text that is being introduced from the other document, from that Word document, I'm going to just navigate through my document here. I'm going to just scroll down here a little bit. All of this text, the main body of this document, all of this formatting is coming to us from the Word document. And a little later on, we're going to dive into that a little bit more and take a look at styles. But this document has already been styled for you. So that's dealing with text. Now that we've got all the text in here and we've formatted the elements that we wanted to format, we're going to move on to adding some graphics here. We want to add some imagery. And we're going to place it right in here with our text and actually flow the text around it as well. So it's going to look like a nice little handout for our students to follow along with this particular chapter. So let's dive back in and take a look at inserting or placing graphics inside of an InDesign document. So in this particular chapter, we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to create some placeholders. Now, these are frames for our pictures to go inside of. So we're going to do this very similar to what we did with the Type tool. Next, we're going to show you how to place an image inside of a placeholder. Once again, this is great for layout artists who you really don't have the images or the graphics yet. You're waiting on that content to come in from a photographer or an illustrator, and you just need to position some elements on your page. So these placeholders are going to help you with that. And then when you have the content, you just put it in the placeholder. Next, we're going to show you how to wrap that text around those graphics. And we're going to show you how to place an image on a page without a placeholder. Finally, I'm going to show you how to place a multitude of images at the same time, which is really great when we're working on catalogs and things like that, where we have multiple images on the same page, or perhaps across multiple pages in our document. So I'm going to jump back over to InDesign. So I'm going to start here on page 2. Okay? And I want to insert a graphic placeholder, a container, a frame. So over here in my toolbox, we have some shape tools here. It's kind of in the middle of the toolbox, and there's two little rectangles here. One has an X in the middle of it, and that's the one I want. This is a rectangle frame tool. And what this does is it will allow you to draw a frame. It has no color, it has no content whatsoever. It's just an empty container. a placeholder, if you will. So what I want to do is I want to just drop this on the page. Now on this page, I have a paragraph called Welcome Screen, and then right after that I have one called the Appearance Toolbar. And I actually want to insert this placeholder in between those two. So with this tool, I'm going to start out here on this little guide, and I'm going to kind of position myself in between those two paragraphs there. Click, hold, and drag, and draw out a container. Okay? And I'm going to release. Now it doesn't matter what size it is because I'm going to resize it here in a moment. I'm just positioning it here on the page so we can see it. Now the little white sides, these little handles, if you will, these little tiny white squares, we can adjust those, but I can't do it right now. Remember, InDesign, in fact, all of Adobe's tools, when you select a tool, you are continuing to use that tool until you select another one. So if I try to grab this handle here on the bottom center, maybe I want to make this frame a little taller, and I try to grab that and drag, whoops, I just created a new frame. Well, I don't want that. So I'm just going to delete that frame. I'm going to switch tools. I'm going to switch to the Selection tool. I'm going to click once on the frame that I want to edit, my placeholder frame, and then I can adjust this handle. So I'll pull this bottom center handle down. Now how tall do I want this to be? Well, that depends. You can just kind of do this visually if you want, or if you have a specific value, which I do. I have a set value that I want to hit. With this item selected, I'm going to go up to my control panel once again. And in my control panel, I'm going to look for this, it's actually the fourth field. Starting from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the height field. I'm going to set that at 2.5 inches, 2.5 inches. I'm going to press the return or enter key, and that box, that frame, is going to adjust its height to exactly 2.5 inches. Pretty cool. Now, for the width of it, I want to make it the same width as my column, so I'm just going to adjust this side handle, and when it gets close to that column edge, it will actually snap to it. It will actually kind of jump to it. These little column guides and these little blue guides out here, they act like magnets. Now that I've got the frame sized the way I want, we can actually see the text flowing underneath it. So if I put something in this container, well, that text is going to be hidden. So let's adjust that. I'm going to go up to the window menu. From the window menu, I'm going to look for this feature called Text Wrap. Now this is going to open another little panel. Very handy little panel, so we may want to add this to our interface over here on the right. Remember, you just simply drag the floating panel here and keep dragging it until it disappears. Now, if I try to drop it way down here in the corner, you see the text wrap panel is not disappearing. It's not going transparent. When I'm in this icon mode like I am, I have to actually put it right up here underneath the last icon. When I do that and I release, I now have the text wrap panel as an icon here. I click it, it pops open. Now, what do we want to do in this case? Well, there's several different text wrap options. And the first one is to wrap it around the bounding box. And in this case, it would work. So I'll turn that on, and you can actually see it has pushed that Appearance Toolbar text below it. That text can't go anywhere. It has to go below it. But now watch what happens here. I'm going to move this container to the left a little bit. I'm going to slide it, about like so. Watch what happens. You see, it's wrapping around this container. So if there's any room in this column for the text to flow, well, that's what it's going to do. Now you can combat that if you'd like. One of the other options here in the text wrap panel is this one, Jump Object. I'm going to choose that, and you can see it's forcing that text to stay away from the left and right of the object. So here's the thing with the text wrap. You apply the text wrap to the object that you want the text to wrap around. All right, well, I'm going to move this little text box back into position, or this graphic frame, I'm sorry. I'm going to move that back into position. And I think we're ready to go. We have a frame here. Let's put an image inside of it. With the frame still selected, go to the File menu. I choose Place. I'm going to navigate to the Lesson 4 folder. In the Lesson 4 folder, there is a Start document in there, so if you would like to start with these new documents, you can certainly do that. That one does not have this container in it as yet, so you would have to draw that. But I also have a Links folder in here. And if you open the Links folder, there are several images inside of there. Okay? The one we're after is this one. If we scroll down just a little bit, it's called the DW Welcome Screen.jpg. DW Welcome Screen JPEG. I'm going to select that, and once again, I'm going to use this Replace Selected Item option here at the bottom. I'll click Open, and InDesign inserts that image inside of my container. Now, when I mouse over the container now, I get this little bullseye in the center. I like to refer to it as the donut, just because I like donuts, but it's actually called a content grabber. And this is, it's been around for a little while in InDesign. It's kind of unique. What it allows me to do is target the contents of this container and then move them around and adjust them. If you'll note, the container looks pretty empty, but there's some little icons there to the right, and that's the actual portion of the screenshot here. And so my image is larger than my container. Unfortunately, InDesign doesn't have an indicator for, say, overset image, because sometimes you want to do this. You want to crop part of your image. And so that's what this frame allows you to do. It allows you to crop this image. Well, in this case, I really don't want that feature. I really need to scale that image down so it'll fit this container. Instead of me manually doing that, I'm going to use a command here inside of InDesign. I'm going to click on my frame, and I'm going to go up to the Object menu. Earlier, we saw the text frame options, and this next feature is very similar to that. Instead, it's called Fitting, and it's going to change the fitting of your content. There's several options here. I'll let you explore those on your own. For now, we want to choose the second option. We want to fit the content proportionately. We'll choose that. It scales the image down proportionally, and now we can see the entire image inside our little graphic frame here. Pretty cool. Now, what if I don't have a graphic frame? What if I haven't created a placeholder? I just maybe last minute decide, oh, I want to put a picture here at the bottom of this page. You can do that. I'll go up to the File menu. I'm going to choose Place. I am going to select appearance.jpg. It's a very small file. I'm going to turn off the Replace Selected Item. I'm going to click Open. Now, earlier we saw this when we placed text. We had the place gun, and it was showing a preview of the text. Look at your cursor now. It's showing you a preview of the image you're about to place. Pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mouse down here to the bottom margin, okay, and I'm going to use that as the starting point. Bottom left margin of my column here. I'm going to click and hold and drag. And what's going to happen here is that InDesign is going to scale this item for me. It's actually showing me the scaling properties right here, the scale percentage. So I'm going to scale this as close to 100% as I can. If it's not exact, not a big deal, not in this case. But I'm going to drag it out and then release. This time, InDesign placed my image and it fit it to the container, to the frame. So they are matching size. Pretty nice. So as you can see, it's really easy to incorporate images into your layouts. And what I've done here is shown you just two basic ways to do it. Create a container first, put the content inside of it. Or if you're just kind of working on the fly, maybe designing on the fly, you can place an image directly into your InDesign document without creating a container first. Now, InDesign will create that container for you, that frame. It has to do that, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, what if we need to place multiple images? Let's say in the case of a catalog, Maybe we have several images that we want to place, and I don't want to go through that process of going to the File menu, choosing Place, choosing an image, and then dragging it onto the page. That can get a little tedious. So I have a series of images that I want to place. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just place them all at once? Maybe just use one place command to place multiple images? Well, that's exactly what InDesign will allow you to do. Let's check this out. So I have some additional images that I want to place. And so I'm going to start over here on this rightmost page, this page 3. And I'm going to use a place command once again. I don't have a container for it, not a problem. Go to File, choose Place, and instead of choosing one item, I'm going to choose multiple items. So in here, I have things like Document Toolbar. I'll select that image. I'm going to hold down my Control key, that'd be Command key on a Mac, and that's going to allow me to choose additional items to add to my selection. So I want to choose the Document Toolbar, maybe the Document window, DW Interface, DW Prefs, and maybe also Properties. But I can choose as many of these as I want. I'm just going to choose a few of them here so you can see what's going to happen. So in this case, I have 5 different images that I want to place. They're different sizes, different orientations. I don't have any of the options turned on. All 3 of the options below are turned off. I'm going to click Open. And now what I get is, once again, a little thumbnail, a little preview of the image I'm about to place. I also have a little blue number on that image. That number indicates the number of images I have currently loaded. Now, which image is this? This could be a little tricky, especially when you're the layout artist. If you didn't create all of this content, you may not know exactly what that represents. So here's another little clue for you. Go over to the right. Over here to the right, with the Pages panel, is this thing called Links. I'm going to open that panel. In that panel towards the top, you're going to see the names of the files that you're placing here. Now, it's also showing the appearance and the DW welcome screen items there listed at the bottom. And notice they have number 2s beside them. They're on page number 2. The other items, they don't have page numbers yet, but the topmost item, DW Interface, has this thing, LP. That means that it is loaded in the place cursor or the place gun. So, check this out. I'm going to move my cursor out here to the screen. So, if the DW interface is the image that it's about to place, I don't see anything there about DW interface as far as my paragraph. So this is not the image I want to place. Can I skip to one of the other images? Absolutely. On my keyboard, I'm going to tap the down arrow key. When I do that, it jumps to another image. And if I look over in the Links panel, it'll tell me which image that is. In this case, that's the DW Prefs. Still not the one I want. So I'll just continue to click the down or up arrow on my keyboard to navigate through the different images. This one is the Document Toolbar, and sure enough, that's the one I want, so I want to place that here. Once again, I'm going to click and drag to place this image and create the container for it at the same time. So I'm just going to drag it out here and drop it. Now, it doesn't have any text wrap features on it yet, and that's okay. We're going to continue to place these images. The next image here, in my case, looking at my Links panel, is the document window, and that's the one I want next. So I'll just come down here a little ways and I'll click and drag and place it on the screen. Okay? And so this process just continues. Now, what if I am through on this page? I want to go to the next page. I could use my scroll wheel to scroll down. Okay? And so I'll place an image on this page. Maybe place an image on this page. Okay? And then I am finally left with this one called DW Prefs. This is the last image. And maybe I decide, well, whoops, I kind of got a little greedy there. I selected too many images, and I don't really need this image right now. If you go to your keyboard and locate the Escape key, should be the top left key on your keyboard, ESC, and you tap that, whatever is the current loaded placeholder item is removed. In this case, that was the last item, so all of them are removed. They're all done. Now we can go back through and we can select the individual frames here, these graphic frames that have the images in them, and we can apply our text wrap. Now I'm going to continue to use this jump object text wrap. I really like that one for this particular instance. It allows me to make these images narrower than the actual column, and I don't have to worry about text kind of wrapping up around the side. So I just simply select these items. Now when I select an image to change it, I stay away from the little donut in the middle, the content grabber. Don't use that. That's for another topic here, or another lesson. But for now, I'm just going to kind of click inside the image, but away from the little donut. And I'm going to apply my text wrap. I'll scroll back to my other pages here and do the same for these. All right. Now, that's going to hold us over for right now. Just the concept of getting the images in here. So as you can see, you can place multiple images, and this is really awesome when you have a scenario like a catalog, like a product catalog, and you have several images of the products listed on the same page, or once again, across multiple pages. It's really, really easy to place multiple images. There's even features like placing those images in a grid, what Adobe calls the gridify effect. And that's really cool, but it's a little more than what we can cover in this course. So look for that in an upcoming course. Now, what about other types of graphics? In this case, we just placed some screenshots that I made, the Dreamweaver application, and these were all JPEGs. But what of, well, maybe some of the other Adobe tools, like Adobe Photoshop. Now, Photoshop is, well, of course, an Adobe product, and it does have its own file type. Now, most people work with it with things like JPEGs and PNGs and various image types. It's an image editor, but it also has its own unique format called a PSD, or Photoshop document. You can place those elements directly inside of InDesign. In this case, I'm going to step outside the box a little bit and use one of the other Adobe tools, Adobe Illustrator, and we are going to place the Adobe Dreamweaver logo. It is an Illustrator file, a native Illustrator file, not an image, not a JPEG, not any of that sort of thing. Native file, and we're going to place it right here inside of another Adobe tool, Adobe InDesign. All right, so for this one, I'm going to navigate to the very first page, our cover page here. And in the upper right-hand corner here, I have a nice little spot where I could place, well, let's say the Dreamweaver logo. That'd look pretty nice up here. So I'm going to go to the File menu. I'm going to choose Place. And I'm going to place this like I would any other image. In this case, you're going to see, if you have Adobe Illustrator installed, it will actually show you the Illustrator logo. Otherwise, you can just look for dw_logo.ai. Now, this is a native Illustrator file. It's a vector file. I'm going to choose that, click Open, and just like before, I'm getting the little place indicator here. Okay? So it's showing me this DW logo. Now, what I'm going to do is, instead of clicking and dragging, we saw that property. Clicking and dragging will scale the image to whatever size you drag. What if I just click and place this item? If I just click, it is going to place this item actual size, no scaling involved. It does create the container, the frame, and it matches the size of the object. Now this one, it looks like it's a little bit larger than the object. Don't let that fool you. That's a little bit of a transparency effect going on there. So any transparent effect, and in this case, the transparent effect, the drop shadow, that is actually created inside of Illustrator. But Adobe InDesign, well, it understands that and respects it. So it will keep that transparent effect. Now, I want to reposition this. I'm just going to drag this up, and I'm going to put it kind of up here on the top right margin. It's covering up my image, or my title here, isn't it? Not so good. So this might be skipping ahead a little bit, but when you're working with images like this, and if you just click and place, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get it the actual size. If that's not what you want, you can always delete the image, or in this case, the graphic. Go back to the File menu, choose Place, select your graphic or image again, choose Open, and this time, instead of just clicking, you want to click and drag. So I'm going to click and drag and place my image exactly the size I want. Perfect. Now, the added benefit of being able to use Adobe native files, well, that is pretty awesome. What you get with this is the ability to incorporate things like layers. Adobe Illustrator can create multiple layers to give you different looks for your graphics. Maybe you include some additional text. Maybe you have different language variants. That's a very common use for layers. So you can take advantage and control those layers in this Adobe Illustrator file right here inside of InDesign. The same holds true with Adobe Photoshop. If you have layers inside of that to maybe control the different look of your image, you can take advantage of that here inside of InDesign. You can also take advantage of various masking options and all kinds of wonderful things that happen in these native programs. So I highly recommend using the Adobe programs when you can and incorporating those native files right here inside of InDesign. Okay, well, that's enough for the image and graphics right now. We're going to move on to our next lesson, and we're going to take a look at drawing shapes here inside of InDesign. Now, InDesign is not known as an illustration tool. You have Adobe Illustrator for that. So if you really need to draw some graphics, that's the tool you want to use. In this case, we're just going to draw some simple shapes. We're going to show you a couple of the shape tools. We're going to show you how to draw some straight lines. Okay? So we're going to just dive right on in. So I'm just going to continue with this file that we have here. If you're following along and you're maybe not quite to this point, you can open up the Lesson 5 Start document, and it should be fairly close to what we have here. Now what we want to do is just add a simple shape. And I'm going to do this right here on the front page. You see, I have this text here at the bottom called Intro Text, and really I want that to stand out a little bit more. This is kind of plain right here. It's just kind of blah. So first, I'm just going to select this text. Using the regular selection tool, I click on the text frame. And for now, I'm going to get it out of my way. I'm just going to drag it over here to this gray area called the pasteboard and drop it. Okay? It's just a little placeholder area. Next, go back over here to my toolbox. And in the toolbox, right there in the center, I have this little rectangle tool. Okay? Now, if I click and hold on that tool, there are other shape tools, and you have 3 basic shapes here: rectangles, circles or ellipses, and then polygons. Now, polygons are great for drawing things like triangles and various multi-sided objects. For our purposes here, though, we're going to stick with just the basics here, the rectangle tool. And what I want to do is create a rectangle here at the bottom half of this page. So I'm going to use my margins as a reference point. I'm going to start in the lower left-hand margin. I'm going to click and hold and drag up and to the right, and cover up just not quite half that page, and then release. Now, this container is also a frame, and right now it's empty. There's nothing inside of it. But if you take a look back over in the toolbox, down here at the bottom half, now this little section right here, I have a white square with a red diagonal line through it. This indicates the fill properties, what's inside this container or this object. And in this case, it's nothing. The red line indicates nothingness, basically empty. But there's also this little purple, in my case purple, yours may be different, a little box behind it. And if I click on that box, you see that box has a little gray box inside of it. This indicates what we call the stroke or the border. And there is a border on this frame right now. So with this frame still selected, let's take a look at that border real quick. I'm going to jump over to the right-hand side of my screen and I'm going to look through these panels. There is a stroke panel. Stroke is basically the border, okay? The outside edge of this container. And I'm simply going to change the weight of this border. I'm going to make it really large here just so you can see. Yes, that is a border on that container. Okay, now, next thing I want to do is change the fill color. I'm actually going to remove the stroke color and I'm going to add a color inside the box. So to remove this color, I'm going to open the color panel. Now notice in the top left corner of this color panel is those same two indicators, the fill box and the stroke box. And the stroke box is in front, so this color panel is displaying the color of that stroke. Bottom left corner of this color panel is that same little none indicator, the white box with the red line through it. I'm going to click on that to remove that border. Next, in the top left corner of the color panel, I'm going to click on the fill indicator to bring it forward. And I want to choose a color. So I'm going to mix up a green, and I have some color sliders here. You'll see the CMYK. Yours may be different. If it's something other than that, in the upper right-hand corner of the color panel, click the menu and choose CMYK. Now I'm going to choose a nice green, and you'll note that there is a little spectrum here, a little rainbow here at the bottom. And when you mouse over it, your cursor changes to a little eyedropper. So I'm going to click on the green, and it fills this container with that green. But I can adjust the color sliders here. So I can mix it up more of a lime green, or I can go the other way, go kind of a minty green, or maybe even a teal color. So you can mix up your colors based on the CMYK properties. Now these are standard print properties here, a little more than what we can get into, but just note that I'm going to give you a recipe here. So the recipe in this case is going to be 63 for the cyan field, 0 for the magenta. Actually, no, it's going to be 21 for the magenta. I apologize. 21. And then 0 for the yellow and 0 for the black. And that should give you a nice light blue color. Now, one of the other things that I might want to do is incorporate this color elsewhere in this document, kind of give me some of that consistent look throughout the document. So I don't want to have to remember that recipe, okay? I want to save this as a swatch. So in the upper right-hand corner of the color panel, click the menu, and there's this option that says Add to Swatches. Now your color sliders are going to be replaced. You're going to have the recipe here in the middle, and you're going to have a single slider that says T. This is the tint. And if you move that slider down, you'll see that it creates a lighter variant of that same blue color. It's a tint of that color. Pretty nice. Well, I'm going to slide that slider all the way back to the right, give it 100%, nice strong blue here. All right, so that's color. Now, what about changing the shape? Now, I created this as a rectangle. I'm going to switch tools to the regular selection tool. And when I do that and I select this frame, I get an extra little handle over here on the right. It's a little yellow handle. I'm going to click on that. And then I get corner handles that are yellow. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and I'm going to drag the yellow handle in the upper left-hand corner of this frame to the right. What that does is it rounds off that corner, but only that one corner. Had I not held down the Shift key, it would have rounded them all off. Now I'm going to go to the opposing corner, bottom right, hold the Shift key, and drag that yellow handle as well. Okay. Now, what about changing the size of this container? Well, these little white handles on the corners and the sides, if I drag this top handle here on the top, just grab that, pull it down, you see it shrinks the box. Nice. I'm going to grab my text frame, click it once with this selection tool, then drag it back on top of this little blue box I just created. When I release it, whoa, the text disappears. This is called stacking order, and it happens in all graphic applications. As you create content, that content is stacked on top of the previous content. So, you've probably seen this command before in other tools, and it's called the arrange command. I'm going to right mouse click right here on the screen of this object. From this list here, I can see arrange, and I'm going to choose this option here, bring it to the front. Now my text is in front. Pretty cool. Okay. So drawing simple shapes like that with the shape tool. Now another tool that we can use here is a line tool. Okay. So over here in my toolbox, I do have this little diagonal line. Okay. I'm going to click on that. And this I want to use on my master page. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom left corner, click the little page menu here, and I'm going to choose the B headers and footers. I'm going to come up here to the top, just underneath my title box here for the header. I'm just going to click, hold, and drag, and I'm going to start drawing a line here. Now, it'll let me drag this line in any direction, so I want to make sure that it's going perfectly straight across here to the right. As I'm dragging, and I'm still holding the mouse key down, I'm going to hold the shift key. And that's going to force it to go perfectly horizontal. Nice. I'm going to repeat this for the other side here. I'm just going to mouse underneath the title here, click and hold and drag back to the left while I'm holding the shift key and create another line here. Nice. But, whoops, those lines are not in the same alignment. They're not aligned to each other. So how can I align them? Well, I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm going to shift click on the first line. My other line, the second line, was already selected. I'm going to come up here to the window menu. I'm going to choose Object and Layout, and I'm going to open my Align panel. Here in the Align panel, I can align these objects. I'm going to align to the top edges. I'll drag this panel, drop it over here underneath the text wrap because we might use that again. Now these lines, I want to change their thickness and their color. So I'm going to go over to the stroke panel first, open that panel, and choose the weight. Let's say 3 points. Looks pretty good. I'm going to close that stroke panel. And now I want to use that same color that I created earlier, the blue color. Instead of going to the color panel and trying to mix it up again, I'm going to go to the swatches panel. Now the swatches are like a box of crayons. These are preset colors. You can build them yourself. And there's the blue color I created earlier. But now I want to be careful. What color am I about to change? Well, top left corner of the swatches panel, I can see it's very tiny, but the fill indicator is to the front. So if I were to choose the color now, it'd change the fill, not what I want. I click on the stroke indicator, and we can see that the purple color is what is indicated currently. I simply change it to my blue color. And I can rest assured that that blue color will match the blue box on the previous page. Okay? So really simple. Drawing graphics inside of InDesign is a really simple process. The folks at Adobe didn't make this too terribly complicated. Once again, this is not a drawing application, but they did give you some simple tools to create some basic graphics. Okay, so now that we have these graphics in here, let's take a look at some of the other options that we have. So now we're going to get into some of the basic edits that we can perform in here. Some of these we've already seen, but let's take a look at how to use the various selection tools. We actually have two different selection tools. I want you to understand the difference between those two and when to use them. And then we're going to show you how to modify the text frames and what happens to the text inside of them. We're going to show you how to resize images and graphics and what happens to those. and, as you've already seen, how to align these objects. So jumping back over here to InDesign, I am going to navigate to one of my other pages here. And we want to modify some of these graphics. We want to make some changes maybe to our text frames and maybe to our images here. So let's get over to, let's say page 1. Okay. So one of the edits that we would make is perhaps a text edit. Okay. Here at the bottom of this page, I have this little intro text, and I'm going to use my zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom in on that text. Okay. I'm going to grab the type tool, and I'm going to highlight the phrase intro text, and then I'm going to hit the delete key to remove it. Now there's an extra paragraph return here. You see this little extra space, so I'm going to hit the delete key to remove that as well. So I can edit this text that I imported from a Word document. Let's refine this a little more. If I highlight that text, I can go up here to the text options in the control panel, and I can change the font. Maybe I want my Myriad Pro. I can change the size of that font. I can even change the color of the text. By default, it is black, but I want it to be, let's say, white. This is really interesting. I'm going to go over to the swatches panel. Adobe InDesign does not refer to white as white, not natively. It refers to it as paper. So I'm going to click on this paper swatch and change my text from black to white. Pretty cool. Now, other edits that I might want to make. Maybe the text frame itself is a little large, so I'm going to scale the text frame. I'm going to scale the blue box behind it. To make these changes, I want to use the regular selection tool. So if I click on the text frame, I can see that the frame itself extends all the way to the bottom of the margin here, at least in my case. Yours may be a little different. And just to very quickly edit this, I'm going to double click the bottom center handle. And you see it shrink wraps up to the actual size of the text. Now that's pretty cool, but it only works on text. So now I'm going to reposition this text. I'm going to slide this down, get a kind of look that I'm after, but I think I can make the text a little bit wider here, left and right. What happens when I adjust the width of this container? What happens to the text inside of it? I'm going to drag this left handle to the left, and you can see what's happening. The text is actually rewrapping live inside that box. Pretty cool. I want to reorient this, and now let's adjust the size of the blue box. I click on the blue box behind it. Once again, I'm just going to grab this top handle and just drag it down visually to the height that I want. Reposition my text a little bit. Looks pretty good. So these are some common edits that you may have to make. When you have to edit a text frame like that, the text inside of it will automatically reflow to the size of that container. Now, most of your containers are going to be rectangles, but occasionally they're going to be different shapes. And so when you resize those shapes, just be aware that that text is going to resize inside of it based on that shape. So if you have angles and maybe circles in there, that text is going to break a little funny for you. So just be mindful of that. It can be done, but you just want to use some caution with it. Okay, well, let's dive back in here and let's make a few more edits. Let's take a look at the second selection tool. This is called the Direct Selection tool. All right. So we've been using the normal selection tool here. I'm going to move over to this one called the Direct Selection tool. It's a white arrow. Now this tool is really interesting. What it allows you to do is to modify the shape. Now the regular selection tool allows you to modify the position, the orientation, the width, the height. This tool will allow you to modify the shape itself. I'm going to modify the shape of this text container. So I'm going to mouse over this text container, and I'm going to mouse over the top right corner of that container. Once again, I'm looking at my cursor here. The cursor is a white arrow with a white box beside it. When I see that, I'm going to click hold, and I'm going to drag up and to the left. And look what's happening here. Look at that text. You see how it's rewrapping inside of this box? Look at the left edge of it. You see how it's got a funny break? That's because this container is no longer a rectangle. It's this kind of weird polygonal shape. It has this odd angle on the top. So that's what this direct selection tool allows you to do. It allows you to transform or morph these shapes. Now, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go to the Edit menu and choose Undo Move. And that'll snap it back to its rectangular shape. So if you want to modify a shape, actually physically change the shape, not just scale it, use the Direct Selection tool. Another place that the Direct Selection tool is really handy is when it comes to groups. Now, I'm going to very quickly demonstrate this for you. I don't want you to try and follow along. But I'm going to take a rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a couple of rectangles here. Okay. Larry, Moe, and Curly here. Let's go ahead and give them some color so we can see them. Now, if I select these three shapes, I can group them. Object, group. Now, look at the bounding box around them. It's changed. It's got a little dashed line. If I deselect these, if I click out here in the background, they're no longer selected. And if I say, oh, I want to move this middle one, and I click on it, and I move it, well, wait a minute, it's moving all three of them. Because they're part of a group. And that's why we create groups. But occasionally you want to edit a member of that group. That's where this Direct Selection tool comes in handy once again. I'm going to choose the Direct Selection tool. I'm going to click out here in the background somewhere. And then I'm going to click once here on the center red rectangle. Click it, and then I'm going to click and drag it. And you can see I can move it independently of the other members of that group. I can change its shape. Maybe I don't want it to be just a standard rectangle. Maybe I want this one to have a little pointed leg on it. I can do that. All of that is possible with this Direct Selection tool. If I switch back to the regular selection tool, and I click on one of these shapes, you see it still is allowing me to select individual members here. And that's just kind of an oddity with this when we use that Direct Selection tool. Now if I click in the background, okay, and then I click on one of these shapes, it remembers, oh, they're a part of a group. So kind of a little oddity, a little anomaly there. I'm not sure that Adobe meant for that to happen, but it does work that way. So when you want to select a whole group, regular selection tool. When you want to select a member of the group, select the Direct Selection tool. All right, now I'm going to get rid of that little fellow, and let's take a look at some of the other options that we have here. I'm going to zoom out so that we can see the whole page. And let's say that we want to scale a graphic. Okay? We saw what happens when we scale a standard graphic, the blue box. But what happens if we scale something like an image? I'm going to scroll down here to one of these other pages where I have an image. Next, I'm going to zoom in on that image just to get a little closer look at it. Okay. Now, if I use the regular selection tool and I click on the image, not on the content grabber, not the little bullseye in the center, I'm just going to click on the image here, it's selecting both the image and the frame. If I click and drag, I'm moving the image and the frame. Okay? So it stands to reason that if I wanted to make this image smaller, I would do that just like I would any other frame. I would grab, let's say, this lower right-hand corner handle, and I'll just drag that up and to the left, and it's going to scale that image, right? Wrong. What it's going to do is actually crop that image. Remember, you still have two items here. You have an image and you have a container or a frame. And that's what this is going to do. So I'm going to undo that. In order to scale both the image and the frame at the same time, you have to use a keyboard shortcut. So once again, I'm using the regular selection tool. I'm going to mouse over this bottom right-hand corner handle, but instead of clicking and dragging, I'm going to hold down the Control key, then I'm going to click and start dragging, and then as I start dragging, I'm going to also hold down the Shift key. The Control key allows me to scale the image and the frame, but look, I can stretch the image or I can squish the image. Holding the Shift key in addition to that maintains the same proportions. So I can scale this image down. When I get it where I want,
I release the mouse, then the Control and Shift key. Now, if you're on a Mac, that's going to be the Command and Shift key. But that Control key allows you to change the size of the container and the contents of that container. Pretty awesome. Okay, so that's just a few of the edits, some of the more common ones, changing text sizes, changing graphic frames. And I just want you to be aware of that graphic frame. When you're changing the size of that, if you're not using a Control key or a Command key, you're actually cropping that image. And sometimes you want to do that, and that's great. But when you want to scale it, hold down the Control or Command key and the Shift key while you drag that corner handle. All right. Well, let's take a look at what we have coming up next. We're going to go back over to text, and we're going to talk a little bit about text styles. All right. So with text styles, we want to very quickly cover what they are. So we're going to show you how to create a paragraph style and how to create a character style, and then how to apply those text styles, and if need be, how to update those text styles. So I want to jump back over here to InDesign. And once again, I'm going to jump back up to page 1. So on page 1, we had some text here that we had manipulated. So I've got the Dreamweaver Fundamentals, the Chapter 1, and then this little intro text here. So I'm going to highlight the phrase Dreamweaver Fundamentals. Now we've formatted this text. We have the size, we have all the properties for that. But if we wanted to replicate this elsewhere in this document, well, we'd have to go back in and figure out what the font is, what the size, what things did we change. So instead of doing that, I'm going to create a style based on this selection. Based on the changes that I've made to this text, I want to create a paragraph style. I'm going to go to the Window menu, and I'm going to choose Styles, and I'm going to choose Paragraph Styles. It's going to open up another dialog box, and by default, InDesign does not give you paragraph styles. Now you see, well, William, there's a ton of styles in there already. Where did they come from? They came from our Word document. In fact, the little indicator here to the far right of each of the styles here in the Styles panel, that is telling you this is imported from an external document. So this particular text, Dreamweaver Fundamentals, is using this basic paragraph style, which is basically none. I want to go to the top right corner of the Styles panel, click the menu, and choose New Paragraph Style. In this large dialog box, the first thing it gives me is the style name. I'm going to call this Title. The rest of the properties I'm going to leave alone. The defaults will work just fine for what I'm trying to do. There are, however, a couple of things I do want to change. The first one is right here in the center. It says Apply Style to Selection. I want to make sure that is turned on. So it will automatically link this title style to this text that I have selected. Below that, you may have this option, Add to CC Library. I want to turn that off. The rest of it we're going to leave as is, and we're going to click OK. Now we have a style here called Title, and you can apply that to other text. Well, just to give you some practice with that, let's see that again. I'm going to highlight Chapter 1, Interface Basics. I want to save this as a style. So I come over here to the Paragraph Styles, click the drop-down, New Paragraph Style. This I'm going to call Chapter Head. Once again, I'm not going to change any of the options. I've already formatted the text exactly the way I want it. I just want to make sure Apply Style to Selection is on and Add to CC Library is off. I click OK. There we have it. We have a new style here. Now, once you create these styles, you may need to make some changes. So what if, let's say that I publish this and I send it around for approvals, and maybe I get a comment that, you know, the title there, Dreamweaver Fundamentals, it would be nice if that were using this same blue color that's here at the bottom. Okay. Well, I'm just going to highlight the word Dreamweaver. Okay. I'm going to change the color of that word. Now, I saved that blue color as a swatch, so I simply go over to the swatches panel, open that up, make sure that the type fill indicator, top left one is forward, and I choose my blue color. Well, that changed the word Dreamweaver, but it didn't change the word fundamentals. And I want to change them both. In fact, I want to change it anywhere this title style has been implemented. So I'm going to highlight Dreamweaver once again. I'm going to go over here to my paragraph styles panel. Notice that my title style has a plus sign in it. I'm going to go to the upper right-hand corner of the paragraph styles panel, click the menu, and choose redefine style. Now the word fundamentals. The entire style has been updated to be blue. Pretty cool. Now you can also do this with the other styles that are in this document, the ones that came over from Microsoft Word. So if I scroll down to some of the text here, maybe some of these little paragraph headings here, I'm going to click in this one here called Document Toolbar. And it says that it's using this heading to style. Well, maybe I want to change that. If I highlight that text, Document Toolbar, I'm going to do the same change. I'm going to change the color of that text. Okay? But it only changes that one instance. It's still using this heading to style, but it has an override on it. So I'm going to redefine that style based on my selection. Update the style, and now you can see all of the other instances have been updated as well. So that's a very basic paragraph style. Now, paragraph styles are the most common ones, and so that's what we're going to cover here. Now, character styles are a little more unique. We don't use them quite as often, but anytime you want to highlight a particular word or phrase within a paragraph, you would use a character style. So a lot of times we'll use these for a bold or maybe an italic, something to give some text some emphasis. So anytime you want to use that, you want to use a character style. You're not formatting a whole paragraph, just a portion of a paragraph. All right, so that's the use of text styles. Now, that's enough to get you started with text styles. There's lots more that you can do with them. There's tons of options in there, and that's things that we'll explore in upcoming titles. Let's take a look at getting this document ready to be published. Let's publish our document. So what we want to do is look into how it is that we can create, let's say, a PDF proof for getting feedback on our document. Maybe we have to circulate it around for approvals before we actually have it printed. And then I'm going to show you how to prepare this document for professional printing. I'm going to jump back over to InDesign now, and I am just going to zoom out so we can see the entire document here. I want to be sure to save this document. I've been doing lots of edits here, and I want to save those. So I go to File, choose Save. So if I feel that this document is ready for publishing, I want to send out a proof. The first thing I want to do is create maybe a PDF proof that I can send or email to my staff. I go to the File menu, and about halfway down, there's this option, PDF Presets. And I am going to choose this one, Smallest File Size. It's going to ask me, where do I want to save this document? Okay, so I'm just going to call this DW Proof. And I am going to drop it in my Lesson 8 folder. I'm going to click Save. And now I'm presented with the export options for this PDF. So we can go in and refine this a little bit more. Now we chose a preset of smallest file size, and that works in most cases. I'm going to go over here to the left though, and I'm going to take a look at the compression. The compression is how it handles all those images. In order to make the file size smaller, it has to compress them. You can change these properties if you want. I find that the default here of 100 downsampling works just fine. So I'll just leave that, but just note that you can change all of these settings. So I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to click the export command here at the very bottom. and it's going to go ahead and generate my text or my document. But it looks like there's an error. There is overset text on these pages. So you see, InDesign here is watching my back. It's not going to let me create a proof that has an error in it. So I'm going to tell this OK, and I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here. So let's run down here to page 9, where I have that overset text. Yep, sure enough, there's some overset text. How do I address that? Well, one of the easiest ways is to simply add another text frame. So I'm going to click on the little plus sign here to load up the text. Go over to my Pages panel, come down here to the very bottom and add a new page. And then I will simply shift-click here at the top margin of that page. No more overset text. Let's go ahead and try to create this smallest file size PDF again. I'm going to go back to the Lesson 8 folder. I'm going to call this one DW. There we go. Give it a name. Click Save. I already have one in here with that name, so I don't want to do that. Let's just call this DW Proof. There we go. And save it again. So you see, InDesign's constantly trying to watch out for you. Make sure you're not making too many obvious mistakes. I click the Export command. It's going to give me a warning here about a transparency blend space. I'm going to ignore that for now, just tell it OK. And here is our PDF proof. So in my case, I actually have Acrobat Pro here, so it's going to show it here in Acrobat. OK. Now, I would send this proof out for approvals. When the proof came back with changes, I would make those changes inside my InDesign document. And then once I've done that, I send another proof. I go through the process again. And once the process is finished and there's no more changes, well, we're ready to publish this. We're ready to send it to be professionally printed. For that, InDesign has a really neat feature here. It's called the package feature. So one of the things that designers run into when it comes to professional printing is that they have to gather up not only their document, but all the assets they use, all the images, all the fonts, and they send those with the file. Now, as a former printer myself, that was the biggest headache I had to face on a day-to-day basis, was not having the right files. When I opened them up, the wrong images there. So Adobe has come up with a wonderful way to combat that. Let's take a look. So right here, I have finished my document. I'm ready to publish it. I'm going to package it up. I go to the File menu. I'm going to choose Package. Here I can see that if I have any errors. In this case, it's going to give me an error about some images using RGB color space. That was the same warning I got when I created the PDF proof. I'm going to ignore that for right now, and I'm going to choose this Package option. It's telling me that it must be saved. So I save it. Next, I'm going to give it some instructions. Now, this one is actually picking up some information that I had given to this earlier. So it's just remembering the instructions I created earlier. But normally you would just add your contact information and any special instructions to the printer here below. The more of this information you can give the printer, the better the possibility is that you will not receive a call from them saying, oh, we don't know what to do. So be sure to fill this out. I'll click Continue, and then it wants to know where does it want to create this package folder. So once again, I'm going to navigate to where my project is, and this is going to be in the Lesson 8 folder. And I'm going to call this thing, my folder, let's call it DW Fun, Chap 1. So this is the folder name. This is where it's going to put all of my asset files. I click the Package command here, and I'm just using the default settings. Now, one of the things I'm going to get is a warning here. Don't worry about this warning. Just tell it OK. I'm going to do the same with this warning, and it's going to go ahead and package this file for me. Now, I'm going to minimize InDesign here, and I'm going to minimize this. And let's take a look at what was actually created. So if I navigate to that folder, okay, it created this little folder here for me. Okay. Inside of that folder, it created by default a PDF file, and this PDF is going to be using one of the other PDF presets. It's going to use a high quality print, I believe. It gives me the copy of my InDesign file. It also gives me this IDML file, which is for those who don't have the latest version of InDesign. If I have a prior version, I can open this IDML file. There's the instructions, and then I have two folders, document fonts, and it has copied the fonts into that folder, and then the document links, all of those images that I used. It made a copy of those and put them in here. So as you can see, this package feature does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It has made duplicate copies of your document, your proof, your fonts, and your images. Everything is self-contained inside of that folder. The last thing you might want to do is compress that folder using some type of zip utility and then send this to your printer, either via email or maybe a service like Dropbox or what have you. But that's it. That's your publishing options. So that's going to wrap us up for this particular course. Now, you can go back and you can review this. You have the course files here, you have the instructions that you can follow along with at your own leisure and explore more of the wonderful features of using Adobe InDesign. Well, that's it for this episode. I'm William Everhart, and I hope to see you again here on BrightStreamTV.